going, yeah. Dear God, today as this session opens, we pray that your presence will be before us and everyone who serves in the decision-making process of our city. We pray for direction which will lead our city to be strong and unified. May we continue the legacy of our founders. May we be granted this day the wisdom to make decisions which will be for the good of our city. We also pray for your special blessing on all those who are working to transform our city and make it a better place to live and work. Amen. If you please honor our nation's flag. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, please.
Counselor Elliott.
Here.
Counselor Kennedy.
Here.
Counselor Leahy. Counselor Laurie.
Here.
Counselor Martin.
Here.
Counselor Madonza.
Here.
Counselor Mercia.
Here.
Mayor Murphy.
Here.
Counselor Nguyen.
Here.
8 present.
Thank you. I read the special meeting notice. Notice is hereby given as required by Rule 6 of the Lowell City Council rules that the Lowell City Council will hold a special meeting of the Lowell City Council in the council chambers on Tuesday, October 30th, 2012 at 6:30 p.m. The purpose of the meeting is to discuss matters pertaining to the city manager. We have first under unfinished business, an ordinance to amend Chapter 272 regarding the annual sewer use charge. A public hearing was held on October 16th. The city manager has a few more items to discuss here. Mr. Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is, as you pointed out, is a continuation of the matter. The public hearing was held a couple of weeks ago regarding the sewer rate increase, which was included within the fiscal year 2013 budget, the 5% increase. There were a couple of questions raised at the time. One was asking for some type of breakdown of a multi-year analysis of the expenditures and revenues, so that there would be an understanding of why the rate increase was chosen at 5% and what impact it would have upon the fund balance moving on to the future. So what I did was I submitted to the council a spreadsheet that runs from 2013 out to 2032. And as you'll note, we've included within that an anticipated 5% increase, which was included within the budget this year, as well as the projected right now 2% increase over the next 4 years. And that, as you can see, leads to a diminishing fund balance as we anticipated. Ultimately, it comes to a deficit position in 2022, so there will have to be something done down the road for further increases. But it also doesn't include any further capital improvements, including the CSO project, which there's another phase of that coming up. This year, as it's projected, it'll be about a $16 increase, which will bring us up to about $336 for the average user, but that still has us very low in comparison, as I indicated in the presentation I made to the council before. It has us very low in terms of the state average. We're at the lower, I think lower 20% or thereabouts. And it also, as I've pointed out, and it was actually when the chancellor was just here from the university, we're discussing water and sewer rates. One of the issues that we have is they're one of our bigger users, the university, the hospital. The rate increase ensures that they're paying their share of this as opposed to passing it on to the taxpayer. The other, so hopefully that analysis addresses the concerns that were raised at that time by Councilor Kennedy. The second question was Councilor Elliott asked us to look into the whether in fact the 20% user fee that occurred in 2004 was adequate to cover the loan orders, because I included within my presentation that week, a couple of weeks ago, that the rate increase that we're looking for is largely to handle the debt service that's accumulated over the last 10 years. Now, the rate increase, by what we've been able to see, now there's a limit as to what we've been able to find on this. So I was able to get a copy of the PowerPoint presentation that apparently was given to the council back in 2004. I did go back and I watched the video of the presentation that was made to the council at that time, and there really wasn't much in the way of a presentation, more just a reading of the motion and a vote by the council to adopt the 20% increase. And we don't have access to a spreadsheet. What we have been able to determine is that the calculation at the time really didn't necessarily tie to the total debt service that we were looking at for that $50 to $66 million, depending upon how you calculate it. What we can say, though, based upon sort of going back and doing sort of a forensic look at it, is that the 20% rate increase is likely about $1 million short of funding the debt service for that work. Again, we don't have spreadsheets to go back and try to analyze fully. Apparently, there wasn't one presented to the council at that time, but we can say that what the debt service is and what the 20% would have meant for the total revenue coming in. But as you going back to the spreadsheet that we've provided for you, you can see a breakdown of how the expenditures and revenues break out this year through 2032 to show what type of impact the rate increases have there and the effect on the fund balance.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You know, I even went back to the budget hearings, and I looked at the cost at the wastewater, and I distinctly remember bringing up the fact that how much money they are saving on certain items. I had a couple of questions, though. The towns who are involved with the city, you know, the cities always seem to be the ones picking up the water and things like that, and we service the towns. I'm just concerned, are they paying their fair share compared to what we're paying here in the city?
Sure.
I'm looking at the cost down the line, and I don't know if it was one of the questions Councilor Martin brought up last week that I followed up on was the EPA on the cost, if we know what that's going to be down the line. And I know FEMA's going to be involved in that too. And we're looking at pump station and improvements throughout the city. And, it is something that has to be done. But I guess right now my main question is, I don't want to see the city of Lowell, the taxpayers, paying the burden for this. And my question is the towns.
The short answer is yes, they do. They pay for, it's all calculated out really by formula and by agreement, intermunicipal agreements that were entered into some 20 or so years ago, that they pay for their percentage of flow going into the plant for the lines that their sewerage goes through. They don't pay for the sewerage that services the residents of the city, but they pay for their share of the lines that their sewerage flows through. And we're in the process of negotiating new agreements with them that we'll be bringing forward in the future that we think will more fully capture, but based on the current wording, yes, they do. It's actually been the topic of some legal disputes in the past, and we have a formula now that all parties agree to, but we do get not only the cost of their share of the operating, but also their share of the debt service associated with those lines and with the upgrades to the plants.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Mercia?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to the city manager. Mr. Manager, that was my question, and he's talking about the surrounding communities. I'm talking about the nonprofits, hospitals, universities. Are they going to, if this raises, they're going to be raised as well?
Correct.
Okay,
So in the case of the university, who was just here, they identified that they pay about $500,000.
right.
They will pay
And you did give them the
$525,000.
added warning. I appreciate the less of the shock. And when you say $16, are you meaning the whole, every quarter is 60?
Just once a year,
So it would be like four
$4.
quarters?
$4 a quarter.
$4.
correct.
Okay, thank you. And if we don't, some don't support this, and you take it from the tax levy, then the nonprofits are not paying that, so they would be exempt from it, wouldn't they?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Kennedy?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to the city manager, it was good to get the spreadsheet. And the spreadsheet reflects the 5% increase?
Yes, it does.
Okay. There was, at least that I could find, no backup for the spreadsheet. I mean, after the spreadsheet, it goes right into whatever happened in 2004, and, all right? So, on the spreadsheet, under the expenditures part, I can understand everything, but what's huge is the line item that says all other expenses. And all other expenses are almost $6.5 million of, or a third of the expenses. And so, what is all other expenses?
Well, that is highlighted in your budget. But primarily, the biggest expense is sludge removal. The second biggest expense is electricity, not just to run the plants, but to run all the pump stations throughout the city.
There is a line item for utility accounts.
Right. That's electricity. That's
Okay,
virtually
I'm
all
sorry,
the
go ahead
utility.
then. So that's not included in all other
Okay.
expenses.
Okay, sludge, utilities. The third is chemicals, all the chemicals used to treat the wastewater. Those combine, those three, I know one is spread out, probably combined to be about $5 or $6 million.
Mr. Young is here from the wastewater. Mark, do you want to add some information on this?
I don't have that document in front of me, but I would imagine the cost would be, thank you.
It's down near the bottom. It's just that it's huge. It's 6.5 million out of 18, and it's just all other expenses. So, and the line item above it says utility accounts, and that's 1.4 million, which makes me think that this all other expenses does not include utilities. But what does it include?
It would include all the line items in our budget, other than salaries and wages, and other than utility. So, if you recall from the budgeting process, I have a budget with a considerable amount of line items.
Yes.
We're grabbing.
Get that part of it, all right? I mean, all the line items are here. It's just that the biggest line item is just the general all other expenses. So what do we spend $6.5 million a year on up there? What is it that's,
Sludge removal,
yeah?
chemicals, maintenance supplies, those are the big items. We have some miscellaneous accounts, vehicle repairs.
How much we spend on sludge removal by itself?
I believe it's 2.7 million.
2.5?
I believe it's 2.7. I think in this budget was 2.7.
Okay. And what do we spend on chemicals by themselves?
I believe it's either 700 or 600,000, or in that ballpark.
Chemicals are about 700,000.
Okay. So you can see, I mean, that's still, that's only about half of the 6.5, right?
Okay, we're pulling that up now.
Okay, we've got sludge removal of $3 million, actually $2,950,000. There is Repair and maintenance and building of grounds is 700,000. I'm just going to read the large line items. Professional services of 480,000.
What would that be, Mr. Moses?
That's from Mark's budget.
We have, if we have to do contract testing, which we have to do, we don't do a lot of analysis at our lab, maintenance contracts, contracts for repair work that we can't do through the city.
Okay.
Okay. $750,000 of chemical supplies, $255,000 of contract street sweeping, $840,000 of sanitary sewer rehab, and then there are various line items of near $100,000 for police details, for laboratory supplies. It's all there.
It's 6.5 million of it is there. I mean, that's a lot of money. I mean, you can see where if that was not an accurate figure, you may not need the 5% increase, right? That's huge. In relation to the whole 18 million, 1/3 of it is just all other expenses.
Well, for the presentation,
Yeah.
rather than list all the expenses that is contained in the budget,
Yes.
collapsed it so it's readable.
I can understand that, Mr. Moses. All I'm saying, I mean, but you must be able to understand why I would want to ask about the 6.5.
Yeah, in Council, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Manager.
Council, we'd be happy to, if it would be helpful, we'll break it down again, even further, to get to that, to show that number. But we assume that, trying to put this all into one spreadsheet, we would collapse it into the various categories and then, provide this analysis.
I understand that. I think that if you have one line item that's 6.5 and it's just a general heading, that it's worth a question or two.
Sure.
Yeah. So included in that is $255,000 for contract sweeping? That's street sweeping?
Correct.
I thought, I asked about that back in the spring, and I thought that street sweeping was being taken out.
We moved, Mr. Young?
I think what we're referring to is catch basin cleaning. The street sweeping is done.
There was one for street
Yes,
sweeping and for.
Right,
catch
we
basin.
moved the,
Correct.
if you look at the prior years, street sweeping was included, we pulled that back out. Street sweeping isn't done, people think street sweeping is done for aesthetic purposes. It's actually done for maintenance of the drainage system, particularly here in the city, where we have the combined system. But we do include we now have put that back into the DPW. We've moved it off contract. We had it out for a private contractor. We've now moved it back on to the DPW. But the catch basin cleaning, which is this line, still is part of the maintenance of the drainage system.
Okay, so the sewer charge will pay for street sweeping and for the catch basin?
Just for the catch basin cleaning.
Well, but there's 255 for street sweeping.
That's, as Mr. Young was saying, that's just the catch basin cleaning. It just got listed as street sweeping again. The street sweeping is being paid out of the Public Works Department.
Okay.
It's an old line description, that's all.
Okay.
Councilman Johnson and Councilor Lori.
On that same spreadsheet, through the mayor to the manager or the chief financial officer, and under the expenses, you have salaries and wages, and then you have plus general fund and direct. Could you explain what that is?
That is, those are costs that are allocated from the general fund budget that are incurred on behalf of the operations for wastewater. For example, the department that sends out both the postage, the bills, and collects those bills, that's the treasurer's office. The department that helps hiring, helps with all the benefits, that's HR. All the computer equipment, SCADA, is run through MIS. So portion of those departments are allocated. It's a formula based on the percentage of revenues, locally generated revenues in each department, in each enterprise. So, for example, I'll make up some numbers that are easy. If there were $200 million of local revenues and 20 million of that was raised by the wastewater, we would allocate 10% of those common costs over to the wastewater department. That's a formula that the Department of Revenue has blessed.
So basically, those are expenses that the wastewater is generating, or that the city is generating on behalf of wastewater, and that just returns it to the general fund. So it's an expense out of the wastewater enterprise fund.
That's
correct. The reason I brought that up is because there's one under salaries and wages and another one that's under all other expenses. And I was just, is there a distinction there?
Yeah, there is a distinction. We're taking a percentage of wage accounts on one, and on the other, it's regular expense accounts like postage, paper, the bills, the paper costs, things like that.
All right, so so there's personnel-related costs in one, and then
And non-personnel.
supply-type
Right.
expenses in the other that the city generates through its purchasing or other efforts outside of the wastewater department. All right. I mean, and it's important to note that even with the rate increase, every year following this, we're still running an operating deficit, only smaller, which is part of the purpose of this, is having a small increase so that over time, we can narrow that, keep that small enough to be manageable, and not run out in less than 3 years and then have to have a huge rate increase. So right now, we have to have a rate increase just to manage it, because it's still running in the red and will continue to run in the red, just be a smaller deficit. Also, in the presentation, I'm not sure, but there was this chart, there's no page, I don't know if you can. There's a chart that begins FY 2006 to FY 2013, annual rate increases. So that was what was intended as rate increases to cover that bond appropriation at that time, that expense. So would that be correct?
It's
That was their plan?
It's the number that was provided to the council at that time.
Okay.
As I said, with that wouldn't have generated enough money to even handle the debt service associated with the 50 million.
Yeah.
But again, we don't have any spreadsheets one way or the other on that.
But even still, it would appear that the last rate increase was for FY 2009, and it was taken in December 2008, so I'm assuming it was FY 2009. It wasn't in the packet as to what, well, at least I don't remember seeing it, what the rate increase was that year. Anyone recall?
In fiscal year,
For that vote in 2008,
in 2008, I believe it was 11%.
11%?
Correct. It was 20% in 2004, 11%, I believe it was, in 2008. But again, that 11% was to help fill the gap that the 20% didn't fill and additional debt service. But at the time, I believe in the presentation that I presented to the council back in a couple of weeks ago, in 2000, it was 11% in 2008. We had counted on 11%, 26%, 11%, 11%. And then we shifted to 11, we started moving it, being able to stretch it out based upon the additional revenue we're receiving, the timing of the bonding, and our reduction in expenses. That we, in the budget, for instance, that you received back in June, or that you voted back in June, we had projected at that time there would be the 5% that you see before you now, then 4%, 4%, 4%, 3%. We now, with the spreadsheet that you see, we've gone 5, 2, 2, 2, 2. And hopefully we can, keep that going, or even decrease that over time with more revenues, reduce costs, different bonding opportunities that we take advantage of to hold that down. So
It looks like there was a 20% increase at the beginning,
Correct.
an 11% increase in 2008, which is a cumulative 31%.
Right.
But their own projections at the time indicated that they'd need a 53% increase between then and the current fiscal year of 2013.
Correct.
And it hasn't happened. We've just been operating in an operating deficit. So even still, we're only adding right now only 5%, only a fraction of what they projected we would need back in the day.
Mr. Manager?
Correct, and I think it's important to note that, my memo to the council points out, they also did not in 2004, and the council did not in 2004, anticipate that there would be $4.7 million taken out of the enterprise to go back to the general fund in 2006, 7, and 8, which...
True.
Which,
And I think most people forget about that, there was a substantial amount of money taken out to balance the city budget at the time.
exactly.
But in any case, even with the proposed rate increases now of 5, 2, 2, and 2, we're still under their original projections back in 2006. And I mean, certainly, it's not my wish to increase the rates, but we have an enterprise fund, and we need to operate it as an enterprise in the black. It needs to at least cover its own expenses. And that doesn't mean we increase rates to do that in totality. It means we need to look at cost cutting, increase revenues through other means, whether it's the town's share or private haulers disposing of their waste. But in any case, we need to make a step towards making this funded properly so that we're not in a constant deficit, worrying about when it's going to hit us, whether we have to either increase rates substantially or put it on the tax rate, in which, as it's always already been pointed out, we would then have to have the tax rate subsidize the water rate. And that's not really fair because some of the bigger water users don't pay taxes. And we just want them to pay their fair share, no more, no less. And so as I see it, this small increase at this time is justified. And then going forward, we need to continue to work to try and minimize the need for any future rate increase, knowing that some of those will be needed. Thank you, Mr. Manager.
Councilor Laurie and then Councilor Kennedy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just looking at the projected increases over the next couple of years, it's 52222. Just out of curiosity, could that 5% be spread out? One of the complaints I'm hearing, and it's really from people who own a lot of apartments. And my answer is, well, this is more of a user fee than just a tax. If you use the water, you're going to pay it. But that was one question I have. Could we spread it out? Or,
I think the short answer is that we anticipated the 5% this year in order to get us on a path to sustainability that Councilman Johnson was just referencing. And our budget, the budget that was voted was based upon that. Any change in that this year would necessitate putting something onto the, maybe not the entire amount, something onto the taxpayers. What we've tried to do is, by going the 2-2-2-2-2, is essentially spreading that out. You could actually have a smaller number, probably, in next year. If you did 5% this year and, let's say, 5% next year, then you could avoid perhaps doing one of those twos.
aggressively cutting costs.
But because you build up the reserve, you build up that fund balance earlier, and then you have more money to draw down over time. But, so we've essentially done that with the 2-2-2-2, but the 5% is one that, at $16, we felt was reasonable, and it was in line with what we had projected back in the spring.
Yeah, I'm not an engineer, but by any sense of the means. Now, it's my understanding a lot of this cost is mandated upon the city to really separate septic water from rainwater and things like that. And we're being mandated by the government, EPA or FEMA, or, so we really don't have a, the past couple of days, we did get hit with at least the outskirts of a hurricane. And if I could just ask Mr. Young, one of the things that I know we're trying to prevent is the overflows at the Duck Island. And just out of curiosity, just what this week meant to the city.
Luckily, we didn't get the amount of rain that could have been originally projected, or other areas of the country got, or even last year when Hurricane Irene hit. But we did maximize flow to the plant. We were taking in over 100 million gallons during the event, and we did have to have bypasses at, I believe, 4 or 5 of the stations for the duration of that storm. And we were still taking additional flow when I left the plant this evening.
Will these investments we're making correct that situation?
It's a slow process, but yes, it will. That's the goal.
Okay.
Thank you.
That's basically was the end of my questioning. One, could we spread it out? And I guess we could, but we're better off to build it now, as Councilman Donce is saying. And two, really, our hands are tied with the investments down the road. I guess between the state and federal government, we really don't have a choice, as with Mr. Young talking. Okay, thank you.
Councilor Kennedy, and then Councilor Noon, and then Councilor Mercia.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to the manager. I have just, I guess, probably 2 issues. And I agree, this isn't a huge tax increase. And so I can understand the argument for it. But in line with Councilor Laurie's comments of why is it 5% this year and then 222, actually, you forecast in year 7, 0. And you forecast 0 increase from 7 all the way out until, I think, until 2031.
Oh, from fiscal, are you looking at the large spreadsheet there?
Yeah,
The longest spreadsheet?
yes.
From fiscal year 2013 to 2018.
In 2019, this,
Excuse 2019 to 2032, I project 0.
Right.
I've put 0.
right.
And you'll notice that it starts running a deficit in fiscal year 2022.
I do notice that.
Yep.
But you could have just put a 2% increase there. I mean, it's
I could-
arbitrary on your part to do that.
Correct.
Okay, and so rather than to have a 5% increase, we could have 2 this year and then just extend the 2 out from year 7 out until we ended up flush, right?
You could.
I mean, that would be another way to do it.
You could do any number of things. The 5% is what we projected back when we did the
Yep.
budget. It was
Yep.
what the budget was voted. So this year, if we don't do the 5, you do a smaller number, you'll increase the revenue on the wastewater, and the remainder will be put on the tax rate for regulations of the Department of Revenue. If you don't do the 5 at all, the full amount will be put on to the tax rate.
Right.
So that's why we're doing it that way, so that it doesn't hit the taxpayer.
And I understand that everybody's vision gets a little fuzzy once you go 5, 6 years out. I
Correct.
mean, you can't be sure. So that's okay. My second question, though, has to do with maybe a policy question, or maybe maybe I'm not understanding this right. But basically, it's kind of like this. Back in June, the city council approved a budget, and that budget had appropriations to cover every department fully. And those appropriations are going to be paid for by the taxpayers through the tax rate. And so when we take the general fund indirect, which is 3/4 of the anticipated deficit, 750,000 almost, and aren't we really using that money twice, or why are we charging that off on the sewer charge when that's already covered? In other words, that's money that's going to be paid to the city.
Correct.
So-
It's on the revenue side. Yeah.
Do you follow me on that? So
Yes.
yeah.
It's used as revenue. If you go into, again, if you look at the budget book, and we actually show that, and I believe it's in my presentation that I gave to the council, it's it's listed as revenue coming in from the enterprises, from water, wastewater, and parking. There's revenue, indirect costs that come in.
That's in every budget for every department?
It's in all those three enterprises have that indirect, and then if you look on the revenue side of the budget, you'll see that that is counted as a revenue. The costs are there, the cost of a person, for the sake of argument, a person that is, to use Mr. Moses' example, let's just say that it's, the person costs $30,000 a year. Let me make it easy so that we can, let's say it's, let's say it's $40,000 a year salary, and 10% of their funding comes from the water, 10% comes from wastewater, 10% comes from parking, and 10% comes from the general fund. The general fund pays the $40,000, but the general fund also receives $30,000 of revenue from the enterprises to pay for that $40,000.
Okay, just so that I can be sure that we're talking about the same thing. Let's say that the treasurer's budget, to run the treasurer's department was $1,000. So that's it, and that $1,000 has to come from the taxpayers, not the enterprise fund or anything, just $1,000 to run the treasurer's department.
Correct.
Okay? Now, in here, for the indirects, we're taking a certain percentage. So let's say that we're taking $100, and we're gonna reimburse the treasurer's department because they do some functions on behalf of the sewage plant.
Sure.
Aren't we charging people twice then? Aren't we charging them when we appropriate the $1,000 and we charge that on the tax rate, and then we take $100 out of the sewer charge and pay it back? Well, let me finish. And pay it back to the treasurer's office to offset. Why? How does that make sense?
You're only, if in that simple case of $1,000
Yeah.
and $100 coming from wastewater, you're paying the person $1,000.
Yeah.
You're charging the taxpayers $900. Yes.
Why?
Because if you didn't have the revenue, which I believe Mr. Moses just showed you,
Okay.
then you would have to increase taxes by that amount.
Okay.
So if you don't do that, that's why we do it. So it's not the taxpayers footing that bill, it's the users footing that bill.
Okay. I got it. Thanks.
Councilor Noon and then Councilor Mercia.
Thank you, Mayor. Through you to the managers. The increase that we proposing, the 5% increase, that is to cover the latest improvement, that is the $35 million that you loan. Is that correct?
Largely, yes. Yeah. It's really the debt service that's driving this.
Yeah. So this is something that mandated by DEP and other agencies that you have to do that improvement.
With the $35 million, $65 million was spent on the CSO. The roughly $35 million, the other $35 million had some involvement with the CSO, but it was also dealing with the building, the facility needs of wastewater. The rate increase in 2004 and 2008 paid for some of the CSO work and some of the CSO work and some of the other costs of the improvements. This is really doing the same thing. It's paying for all those costs. The work at the facility is dealing with the issues, for instance, of, and I'm sure all the councilors here are familiar with this, the odor problem, the screw pump problem, the upgrades to the facility that make sure that it keeps running so that it will be, so that we won't have a breakdown that would be catastrophic to the city. So that's where the $35 million went.
So if if council vote deny this, that means the taxpayers will absorb the whole thing.
That's correct.
To do it this way, that means the city and towns will have to pay their share, their percentage of lines and sewage that run through their city and town.
They're getting billed for that anyway,
Right.
but it's making sure that the users
The user.
are paying for this.
And that including, as Councilor Mercia indicated, universities and other nonprofit organizations will have to pay their share on this.
Exactly.
Right. Well, thank you.
Councilor Mercia.
In carrying that thought onward from the 35 million bond authorization, which probably includes the screw pumps, I'm curious to know, we have 4 of them. One, the last I heard, was only one operating. Where are we now? Do we have all 4 of them? And if we don't, are any of these screw pumps under warranty?
Counselor, they're all under warranty. 3 out of the 4 are repaired and operational, and 1 is left to be repaired, and that'll be done shortly.
So that is an improvement over the last time I heard. We only had 1 operating. So things are looking up. That's good. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Councilor Elliott?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Manager, a couple of weeks ago, when I asked about the rate increase in '04, I wanted to get the debt schedule subsequent to that, because it was for CSO, and because that tells me, and that was my understanding at that time, that the rate increase that was approved was to cover that, and it was going to cover it. In fact, it did cover it. But you didn't provide us anything to show us that it did not. Now, I will say I did find in, and I don't know if you have found it since, a spreadsheet or forecast. I was looking for the debt schedule, and I found in the 2010 budget the debt schedule, and it's broken out pretty nicely by project. It doesn't say which one, but that's what I was trying to find out. Because you did say that, you know, money that was encumbered as part of that CSO issue was to cover this, and the schedule that I saw at that time, back in '04, was going to cover this, and there was a significant surplus at that time, a fund balance of close to $10 million plus in there. So my point is, this rate increase is for loan orders subsequent to that. And I guess I am also concerned that there have been improvements made, and with the intent of those improvements being to improve energy efficiencies at the plant. In fact, we received ARRA money to make many improvements there. You know, you speak about the odor mitigation plan. We also received a significant settlement from other communities to pay. At the time, it was, as it was my understanding, to pay for, to address a lot of the odor issues there, and I believe it was $1.5 million. So I'm wondering why there is this deficit, and if it's because of the last loan order that you brought in, that's why I didn't vote for it. So you're saying the deficit at this point will be $300,000, but it's from additional loan orders that were brought in here. And I can recall, so I'll let you answer that question.
$300,000 is the revenue that's anticipated in the budget for this year based upon the rate increase that was discussed back in June and the budget that was approved back in June. The rate increase overall, as I think I was just speaking to Councilor Noon about this, is for some of the $50 million, but it's largely for the $35 million that, yes, included energy improvements. It also included the odors, as well as the screw pumps and the $6 million for the pump station and any number of other items that are improving the facility and dealing with the issues that we have running this plant. Because unfortunately, when the facility was built some 30 years ago, unfortunately, since that time, there really hasn't been much in the way of investment in that facility, which obviously is a dangerous thing to have happen. But as far as the town's money, that really didn't, I won't say that went to the odor issue. That was money that I believe Tewksbury and Drake-It, and Mark may remember this number, or Tom may remember this number. I don't recall exactly what it was, but I remember it was Tewksbury and Drake-It money coming in because Chelmsford made an agreement early on to pay a certain amount. and the Tewksbury and Drake money came in, and I remember there was some discussion with the council, because it was very early in my time here, of what to do with that money, and I do recall insisting that it go into the enterprise, because I know there was some discussion of having it go to the general fund, but it went into the enterprise, but that was more than offset by the $4.7 million that was taken out of the enterprise and put into the general fund that the council approved.
I know the solicitor will know the answer to this question. I think you were working on it. What was the settlement, Madam Solicitor?
My recollection, the settlement for those two towns was 1.2 million.
Okay, thank you. I thought it was, can I just ask one more question, Mr. Mayor, to Mr. Young? How much money did we get from the American Reinvestment Act, specifically for projects at the plant?
The specific green funding that we had was $4.6 million.
Okay, and was there additional funding that went to the plant for shovel-ready projects?
Well, we went through SRF loans, and we also got some loan forgiveness.
How much was that?
I believe totally it was around 1.2 million.
Right, and that was my next, 1.2 million in loan forgiveness, 1.2 here. I just have a hard time understanding why we have to raise rates again when we have energy 4.7 million to save energy on screw pumps and electricity at the plant. We get these settlements, we get additional money, and again, in '04 and then in '08, there were rate increases. So we have to do better, and it's bringing in additional revenue from the improvements. That was my understanding. That was going to keep rates low. It just doesn't add up. And I understand the information you're bringing forward, but I'm not going to support this. If we have to cut costs somewhere, then that's what we need to do. And that's, I think, what we have to do, and that's why I didn't vote for, this in the budget, knowing that this was it's another increase. And if that loan order that was approved, the $35 million, was going to cost this, then, that's why I didn't vote for it, because I know at some point in time, this has to be paid for, and we have to live within our means. So, I'd like to see if you can find it somehow, somewhere, Mr. Moses, a debt schedule for that particular loan order and the impact that would have on that enterprise fund. I know that's, at a later date and this is going to be paid for, but those are my concerns. Thank you.
Mr. Manager.
Just if I could just address a couple of the council's issues that I understand. I don't recall whether you voted for or against the loan order, but the council as a whole did vote for the loan order. And the responsible thing for me to do, and I believe for the council to do, is to raise the rates to pay for the debt service that was approved in the loan order. And the debt service went towards improvements to that plant that make it its continued use possible, and its effective use possible with no odors, or low odors, energy efficiency that reflects itself in the costs that we've been able to control. We have gone out and we've gotten additional revenue. We have held down our costs. We do have, as I stated earlier, one of the lowest sewer bills in the Commonwealth. We're really the envy of all of our peer communities and most of the state with what we charge. The deal that people have here in the city of Lowell for sewer use is incredible. That they have a facility that does what it does and is able to do it at such a low rate is really remarkable, and it's a testimony to the good work that the wastewater people do and the actions that have been taken. But I understand, Councilor, that I sort of anticipated that you would vote against it. I understand that. I don't think that it's the right thing to do. That's why I come forward with this rate increase proposal. If we don't increase the rates, then we're simply kicking the can down the road to future people to have to pay for this. And essentially what we would be doing is replicating what had happened with the general fund here in the city back in the mid-2000s, 2005, 6, 4, 5, 6, that where we basically draw down our reserves in order to put off the inevitable. And I think that's a mistake, but certainly if that's what the council wishes to do, I understand.
Councilor Elliott.
You know, Mr. Manager, one of my concerns was at the budget time, and you should know this because I would never do this. You know, bringing in, you know, you put council or you put this issue right square in the middle and you can say, well, we're just kicking the can down the road, or you know, if you don't vote this, then it's going to go on the tax rate. Well, maybe you should have brought this in before the budget was approved. That's the thing to do. That's not putting the horse before the cart before the horse. You come in, say, this is what has to happen. If not, we have to make some adjustments in the budget. Not, well, you approve this, so if you don't, you know, if you don't adopt this, then taxes are going to go up, and that's a difference that I have. I wouldn't bring it in beforehand, because then you're paying people into a corner. So, and you know, and I do understand, and you use this almost every time, or I'll say every time, there's an increase, whether it's taxes, whether it's water, whether it's sewer, that we're one of the lowest in the state. And that is a good thing, but I also don't think it's a reason, well, because we're one of the lowest, that, you know, we can raise rates. You know, people in the city, you know, our median income is different than people throughout the state or in other communities. So I think it's incumbent upon us to keep rates low so they can afford it, so they can afford their homes, they can afford their bills, they can afford their taxes, and still have a little bit of money left over, you know, to enjoy life. It shouldn't be, well, we have the one of the lowest rates, so, you know, let's raise it. So I just wanted to respond to those, and, you know, for those reasons, that's why I think that we can do better, and we have to do better, because raising rates and taxes is just not the answer all the time.
Councilor Kennedy.
Mr. Mayor, thank you. I just have one other question. I wasn't here for when the vote was taken on the $35 million bond, but my understanding was that part of the $35 million bond included $8 million for the pump station. Is that correct?
I believe it was $6 million.
$6 million. And what happened with that? What's the status of that?
I thought we had discussed it in an early meeting, but in shorthand, our work with the EPA is not yet completed. We still have requirements that they're putting upon us for the CSO, the sewer separation. And as part of that, we think it would be useful to have a new large pump station at a location in Centerville that will serve multiple purposes for us, including the flood protection and sewer separation. So rather than spend $6 million on refurbishing a pump station where it is now,
Yes.
that, again, the city did not, basically allowed to break down years and years ago, we think it makes more sense to build a larger pump station at a separate location that will serve those multiple purposes and thereby save us money in the overall CSO project.
When do you anticipate that we would do that?
Probably, Mark, what are your thoughts? Probably 2-3 years for us to get that new pump station built? And if I may, that's likely going to require us to come back to the council. I warn everyone now, it's going to require us to come back to the council for another loan order so that we can add in the additional money that this is going to cost, plus the other CSO work that we need to do.
And you're saying that because you're anticipating that this larger pump station is going to cost more than the $6 million in the original authorization?
Right, but the whole CSO work that we're doing is going to be a substantial sum of money above, because I think initially the expectation was that CSO work was going to cost a couple $100,000. We've only spent about 60.
Okay, so when will we be doing this?
We would be looking at coming back next year. Now, if you're looking at projecting out when that pump station would be all done, I think during the presentation that we did to the neighborhood group in the mayor's reception room, we were talking about a 4 to 5 year process. It's not contingent upon getting the pump station finished, but that's the length of time it would take to recertify the levee system.
Okay, and so out of the 35 million, how much of that has been, have we spent?
We don't have that
But just-
immediately, but, probably in the $25 million, $26 million range.
Okay,
Maybe Mark has that right off top of his head.
Without looking at the latest figures that I can get from the auditor, we have that $6 million that we kept for the pump station, and there isn't much left in that bond. It's pretty much spent.
okay, thanks.
Councilor Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Some of these questions are actually getting to the question I have, which is these projections, that show a 5% increase this year, then 222, that only covers the existing debt service, right?
That's correct.
So there's nothing else, I mean, there's more work to come here that is not even factored into these numbers. So I actually did want to ask Mr. Young where we stand with the CSO project, because you're right, we are mandated by EPA. The original $65 million plan, if you will, was a compromise. The extra money, the $35 million spent is in the plant for it to handle that volume that comes in there, but there is additional CSO work. In the 2004 plan, this shows design work for Warren Street area separation. I think that is at least underway. Maybe that's, where are we with the CSO work that's been publicly discussed, and what is on the horizon?
The work that's been publicly discussed has been pretty much completed. We did a lot of work in various sections of the city, the Highlands, Pawtucketville, and the Acre, and we substantially reduced the amount of CSO that's entering the river. However, as EPA has indicated to the city, we're mandated to stop all CSOs, zero discharge into the river. We're not at that point yet. I believe in the beginning of next year, I will be approaching the manager on coming up with the next phase. It's something that, as you know, Councilor, EPA is mandating us to do. We're making steady progress. We're working with them. And I think one of the benefits that we have is that not only are we complying with CSOs, but we're also eliminating storage and backups from Lowell residents' basements and streets.
Okay, so, everybody knows we need these projects. There are, as Mr. Young indicates, there's benefits to the neighborhoods. They're disruptive, of course, with the construction, but I think by and large, we all remember Sparks and Emery Street in that area that had significant benefit. I know Chelmsford Street was dug up for a significant period of time. Again, there's benefits that accrue to the neighborhood. I know there was benefits on Outer Gorham Street to some houses in that whole neighborhood as well. So, this to me is almost a necessity because of what lies ahead. And to not do this now, it's just going to be further behind the 8 ball down the road. I think we have a case to make to EPA that at some point this has to end, and that a certain number of days of bypassing the plant is inevitable nationwide, and Lowell, Massachusetts shouldn't be singled out to eliminate every possible piece of pollution that might get into the river. But we still have a ways to go to make that case, I think. And even if we could make that case today, we still have to pay for what's been approved to date. And some of these improvements have been noticeable. The odor, for one, is a significant one, but all these other ones that Mr. Young and others have spoken about have certainly had an impact, a positive impact on the residents.
Councilor Mercia.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It seems to me that the federal government issued a mandate, and yet it's an unfunded mandate. They want us to do it, but they don't give hardly anything to help us get in there. But I do remember some time ago, way back in the beginning, it was the CSO, the combined sewer overflow, and the separation. And it seemed that I remember there were 9 points of entry into the water, like 9 culverts. Is that, Mark? Is that true, like 9 points of entry, 9 culverts going into the?
That is correct, Counselor.
And how many have we accomplished, completed?
Well, we can't stop the overflows totally from these, from those 9 CSO stations, but we've reduced the number significantly. Just to give you an example, so far this year, now this is the pre-flow of this hurricane, we've discharged around 60 million gallons. In previous years, we were up to 300 to 400 to 500 million gallons. So this is the result of the investment that the city has done through the years to eliminate that. And as Councilor Martin said, we still have a ways to go before we can get this number down so that we could make an argument to EPA that the city has done enough.
And you still have the Vacon trucks?
Yes.
Going out?
Yes.
And that helps significantly too, right?
Yes, anytime you can remove debris from lines, it helps things flow, gives you more storage.
All right, thank you.
Councilor Elliott?
Mr. Young, while you're up there. So I do recall the consent decree was agreed upon, and 65 million was to mitigate X amount, from 300 down to, or from 500 down to what, 60? So when's the last time you were in touch with EPA regarding phase 2? Has there been discussions in the last 2, 3, 4 years? I'm just trying to gauge, because there seems to be some concern when that is
I
going to
believe
come.
about a year ago. I don't remember exactly, Counselor,
No.
but it may have been about a year ago.
Okay. So that discussion hasn't taken place yet?
No.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Any further discussion? We need a motion to,
It's a roll call.
Well,
motion to approve by Councilor Laurie, seconded by Councilor Mercia. Roll call, please.
Counselor Elliott.
No.
Counselor Kennedy.
Yes.
Counselor Leahy.
Yes.
Counselor Laurie.
Yes.
Counselor Martin.
Yes.
Counselor Madonza.
Yes.
Counselor Mercia.
yes.
Mayor Murphy.
Yes,
Counselor Nguyen.
Yes.
8 yeas.
thank you. Next
Yeah.
we have
Um,
Councilor Noon.
Mr. Mayor, if I may, a motion to suspend the rule to,
For the purposes,
the purpose is to have the chief and Christian Doherty to make an announcement about the upcoming press conference for medical marijuana.
motion
Question
to
3.
suspend
Question
the
3,
rules
sir.
by Councilor Noon, seconded by
Second.
Councilor Mercia. All those in favor, signify by saying aye. Opposed? So voted. Mr. Superintendent?
Thank you, Mayor Murphy, Councilor Nguyen, and the rest of the councilors. On November 6th, Massachusetts voters will be electing the next president, choosing between candidates in local elections and voting whether or not to legalize marijuana for purported medicinal purposes. This is question 3 on the ballot. As a mother, a former substance abuse prevention professional, one with family members in recovery, I am deeply concerned about the negative impact this would have on my community, my son, and his friends. Chronic pain is a disease. I don't refute that, but taking this referendum and letting voters determine what is medicine is a mistake. Medicine is vetted by the FDA for a reason. Such regulation protects us by controlling dosage and delivery and addressing side effects and contraindications. This law will not do that. 3 states have the full legalization of marijuana for recreational use on their ballot this year: Colorado, Washington, and Oregon. All 3 states already allow for marijuana to be used as medicine. All three states are struggling with crime, addiction, and an industry out of control. There are more teens and increasingly adolescents in treatment than ever before. Do we want to see full legalization on the 2016 ballot in Massachusetts? We will if question 3 passes in Massachusetts this year. By then, it will be too late. This is a public health issue, a public safety threat, and a community-wide problem that will have far-reaching and terrible impact if this law is passed. As of April 1, 2013, Lowell could be the home of 1 or more pot dispensaries. Anyone 21 years or older could own and operate a Lowell Medical Marijuana Treatment Center with no special training, not even a high school diploma. As of January 1st, 2013, a person of any age can obtain a written certification, not a prescription, as marijuana is not FDA approved as medicine, from a doctor with whom they have a bona fide relationship, and bona fide is in quotations. As of January 1st, 2013, a person of any age could grow pot on Lowell property with a limited cultivation registration. Although specific conditions are listed for which a doctor can recommend marijuana, the law's language also includes other conditions, in quotes, which would allow anyone to get marijuana for any reason: anxiety, pain, insomnia, ADHD, back pain, and headaches. People of any age would be able to carry a 60-day supply of pot of an undetermined amount on their person and in their vehicle at any time. Unlike FDA-approved medications, there would be no expiration date, no limit on refills, no dosage requirements, and no mention of any contraindications on a written recommendation from a physician. In other states, medical marijuana treatment centers sell all strands of raw pot and medibles, candy, cookies, fudge, ice cream, sodas, gelatos, which could easily end up in the hands of children. Ballot question 3 includes severability language that makes it impossible to repeal if it doesn't work out. In other states, a multi-million-dollar legal industry has been born from the passage of medical marijuana laws. Pot dispensaries are a magnet for crime and have cost states, counties, and municipalities millions of dollars in law enforcement and court costs. The passage of this law will contribute to greater access and use of marijuana among adolescents and teens. In fact, Lowell 8th graders' lifetime use of pot is 20% greater than 8th graders nationally. Lowell 8th graders' regular use of pot is 11.3% greater than the national rate. Thank you.
Thank you, Kirsten. Basically, we're here tonight to ask that you join us at a press conference on Thursday at 4 p.m. in the mayor's reception room when we discuss this issue. We feel this is going to have a tremendously negative impact on the city of Lowell, and we're very concerned about this. And we'll present some points on Thursday as well to discuss this issue and to try to make sure that people understand and appreciate the negative consequences that could result from the passage of this bill. So we thank you for your time tonight, and we hope to see you on Thursday at 4 o'clock in the mayor's reception room.
Thank you. Next on the agenda, we have a vote for authorization for the Greater Lowell Technical High School repair project. And I believe we have a presentation by the superintendent.
Good evening. My name's Mary Jo Santoro, and I'm the Superintendent Director at Greater Lowell. Thank you, first of all, for allowing us the opportunity to come before you tonight to present our proposal for a major repair and renovation project through our application to the Massachusetts School Building Authority. The goal of this project is to make our school, your school, a safer, more efficient school building. Tonight we have a three-part presentation planned to share with you on several topics. The first part of the project, I will do a little bit of background information, and then I'll invite our architect, Kevin Buckley, to come and speak to you about the project scope, and last but not least, our school business administrator, who will discuss the cost and the budgeting proposal for this project. At the end of the presentation, we're more than happy to answer any questions that you might have, and also welcome your feedback and comments on the presentation itself, as that may assist us as we move forward and make additional presentations throughout our communities. The next slide in the book that you have with you in the presentation pretty much does follow what you have in front of you, as well as what's on the screens. Gives a little bit of the history. The school was built in 1974. To date, we have 2,112 students enrolled. That was our October 1, 2011 number. We have all of our communities listed there, and you can see that we have, from the city of Lowell, as of October 1, 2011, 1,554 enrolled students. We have 23 technical programs in the school currently, and 35 continuing education programs, 327 full-time employees. This is the first time in almost 40 years that Greater Lowell has had to come out to the communities to ask for assistance with such a major funding project. We have prided ourselves on being able to keep up with the school pretty much on our own with our regular annual assessments to the communities based on enrollment. And so this year, or throughout this project, we started to look at some of our critical need items. And the project began with discussion around such items as you see listed for a total of about almost $32 million. These were the issues that we had the most concern about initially. And as we began our process with the MSBA, which was the first time for most of us at Greater Lowell, we were advised by MSBA to make sure that we looked at every item in the building or every issue in the building that needed to be addressed at this time. Once the MSBA gets involved in a project, and some of you are probably more familiar with us than we are, we are learning as we go, but we know Lowell has been involved in other MSBA projects. They really don't want you to come knocking again. So we went back to the drawing table with the architects and started to investigate all of the issues that not only would bring us up to code, but would also address any of the educational issues that the state likes to see addressed at such time when you're asking the state for assistance with these types of projects. So you can see that initially we started with looking at a roof, the HVAC, electrical and fire alarm, sprinkler system, and then bringing the building up to the ADA code, which the architect will talk a little bit more during his presentation about. In addition to the items listed here, we also have issues attached to some plumbing, windows, doors, gym floor, etc., which would all come at some point down the road if we don't take care of that at this time. On the next slide, we just like to discuss a little bit our community partnerships. Greater Lowell makes an attempt to be out in the community, to contribute to the communities, to give back to the communities. This page has a general list of our community partnerships, and there's a little note below that indicates approximately 300 of our students are employed annually through our cooperative ed program at about 110 local businesses. The next page is a little more specific in the community to the city of Lowell. We developed a presentation with an overall view of the project for each community, but also a little specifics toward the community that we're speaking to. There's some photographs on this page, and it shows such projects as metal fabrication students restoring the Passer Conway statue at Edson Cemetery, cosmetology and fashion students offering services to residents at the Francis Gatehouse and Dewey Archambault Towers. Our plumbing students worked on the Father Maguire concession stand. We had plumbing and painting students who were involved with the renovation of the Greater Lowell Boys and Girls Club. We've been community service partners through our student volunteers who have participated in many food drives with the Merrimack Valley Food Bank. Our auto students painted a fire truck and a police car. We've had masonry students involved with construction of dugouts at Shed Park, carpentry students involved with Habitat for Humanity projects, and students coordinating numerous clothing drives for the Salvation Army and Merrimack Valley Legal Services. We've had graphic students print materials for local organizations, including the Lowell Police Department and Lowell High School's golf tournament, and graphic students who painted the Victorian silhouettes on the Willette Bridge. Culinary students providing turkeys for Thanksgiving to Kiwanis and Salvation Army, and medical students who have partnered with local hospitals to run blood drives. Those are certainly not all of the projects, but a good list of how we are always trying to be good neighbors and good partners with the communities that we serve. On the next slide, 8, you can see that the Massachusetts School Building Authority committed its share on October 3rd at their board meeting of 76.84% to the total project. You'll see a little later in the presentation, the total project is roughly $65 million. The state is offering to reimburse us $50 million of that cost at this time, provided, however, that all 4 of our contributing communities vote to support the project and commit to their share of the cost of the remaining $15 million. The next page, slide 9, really just outlines the whole MSBA process flow chart from start to finish. We started this process back in 2007 when we submitted our first statement of interest, which we had to refresh and resubmit in 2008. That started the process that you see outlined on this page. And you can just see a little "we are here" with an arrow, which shows that at this point in time, we're about 2/3 of the way through the process. We have to get a local vote from our communities within 120 days, which brings us to just the end of January, to receive the support that we need from the communities in order to receive the funding that the MSBA has committed to this project. The next part of the presentation, I'd like to introduce to you Kevin Buckley from KBA, which is Knight, Bag & Anderson, the architectural firm which we have an agreement with. Kevin can speak to you a little bit about the scope of the project, and I'd like to invite him up now. Mr. Buckley?
Thank you. My name's Kevin Buckley of Knight, Bag & Anderson. Our firm was first hired back in 2008 to perform what we call a facility audit of the building. So it already had exceeded 35 years in age at that time. And what we had noticed that the building is extremely well taken care of for a building of this size. It's actually the largest vocational school east of the Mississippi. It's 500,000 square feet. And the greater Lowell community puts in upwards of $500,000 on an annual basis to upkeep the building. So it has what we say is good bones. But in those 40 years that the building was first built back in 1974, so much has changed. The building code itself has changed 4 or 5 times since then. We have a new energy code. Asbestos was still in use at that time in 1974, and it's throughout the building. It's used for acoustical panels in all the classrooms. The handicapped accessibility was non-existent at the time. Massachusetts was first before the federal government came up with the Americans with Disability Act. We had our own architectural access board, and that came in after this building was built as well. So to build this type of building today that's used by 2,000 students on a daily basis, all of the building would have to be fully accessible. All of the energy codes would have to be upgraded so that we don't use the fossil fuels that we use. And so we've broken this down into 3 phases of what we think needs to be done in order to bring this building back up to standards. And we call it the replace, renovate, or new. The replace is the roof and the skylights. We're talking single pane glass, which we wouldn't even think of ever using now, in all of the skylights, and those would be replaced in their entirety. The roof's already been replaced once before, and a great deal of maintenance is going into it now because it leaks throughout the building. The bucket brigade, as they're called, have to come out on a regular basis during rainstorms. So at 40 years, a roof is expected to last 20 or 25 if you're lucky, but with a large school like this, all the rooftop equipment that services the building HVAC-wise is on the roof. So a lot of maintenance has to occur, so a lot of traffic has to take place over that roof. All the windows and doors are existing. Back in 1974, the windows were called thermal pane. They were the big thing at the time. It was a double insulated glass window. Unfortunately, it's 5 times less efficient than a normal low-E glass, double insulated glass window that we have today. So these are the original windows and doors. The metal siding is only a couple of inches thick, and that's the only insulation between the concrete walls and the interior of the building. It's a 2-inch piece of fiberglass insulation, which has degraded over that time as well. It goes without saying that the HVAC, the plumbing, the electrical systems, those are all original to the building. Some of the rooftop units, the HVAC, were replaced. They originally were all electric, and there's still a number of original electric units still in place. Somewhere along the process, they were replaced with gas units where they could be replaced so that they would run more efficiently. But those themselves have now exceeding 30 years in use and are failing. The sprinklers and the fire alarm system, there's very few sprinklers in the building. They only go in when a new project takes place, and that's because they're grandfathered in. And the fire alarm system, although it exists in the building, the fire alarm system is not what we call an addressable system. It's just a zone system. If the fire department arrives for an incident, there may be 30 or 40 or 50,000 square feet that they see one blinking light that's an alarm. Now we put in what's called addressable systems. So hundreds of detectors go in, and each of those detectors would then flash what is actually an alarm so the firemen can pinpoint the situation immediately. The next phase we call renovate, and the renovate is to get rid of all that asbestos that's left. They're called transite asbestos panels that exist in all the classrooms. Those would all come out. The interior floors and walls, we're not touching the new lockers that have been put in the last 3 or 4 years, the new carpet, any of the floors that have been replaced. We're only looking to replace portions of the floors that have creosote soaked into the wood blocks. Now, the wood blocks, back then, they're 5 inches thick, they're soaked in creosote. The telephone poles and fence posts used to be soaked in. Now they can't be done with that anymore because it's a carcinogen. So we're looking to get that floor out because it's adding to the poor air quality of the building, and you'll see a photograph of those momentarily. Handicapped accessibility throughout, that goes without saying. All the entrances, the doors, the ramps, and the floors need to be accessible. And the 13 science labs. The state, in order to receive reimbursement from Mass School Building Authority, they ask you to maintain what they call their science lab initiative. And that is to bring science labs up to current standards. Current standards are somewhere north of 1,440 square feet per room, and Greater Lowell only has 1,000 square feet per room. And the configuration that I'll show you in a photograph is not suited to the Mass School Building Authority requirements. And the last piece that we call the new piece is the cafeteria addition. In order to receive state funding, this reimbursement money, the state asks that you only have 3 seatings for lunch periods for the students in any one day, and that's because of the disruption to the overall educational process. Greater Lowell currently, because of the number of students and the number of satellite cafeterias that were designed in 1974, has to have 5 separate seatings. So it's very disruptive. The lunches start early, they run late, and it mixes up all the classroom time. So the cafeteria addition is proposed to go out front. That would be constructed to handle 1/3 of the student population. And at that point, it'll freeze up what they call their satellite cafeteria east and west commons, which are actually up on the 3rd floor. And the food is prepared on the 1st floor in the kitchen and has to be lugged up through the elevators and served in the 3rd floor cafeterias to the students at either end of the building. That would be eliminated. It's open space that would greatly be used for science labs. Quickly, I'll just run through some photographs that just represent all of the things I've just talked about, the inaccessible toilet rooms, all the hardware in the building. This just shows one of the leftover knobs, a number of lever handles. Whenever work is done in an area, the lever handles are installed, but the knobs are in those areas that are not under renovation, what we call grandfathered in. So all of these things that would not be allowed in a building today have been grandfathered over time, and you don't have to make those changes until you make a major renovation. The next slide shows those science labs I talked about. The peninsula islands that you see here, and they look fairly nice in this photograph from a distance, but up close, this is 30 or 35-year-old plastic laminate. It's delaminating. There aren't ground fault receptacles, but more importantly, what the state says is their new science lab initiative has shown that all the science casework and sinks should run around the perimeter of the room, greater than 1,400 square feet, and then you would have classroom tables and chairs for the students in the center of the room. So it becomes a true classroom/lab. The students don't have to leave one space or the other in order to get proper instructional space. The next photograph shows that creosote-soaked flooring. This is that 5-inch wood block. It's soaked in creosote to keep it from rotting. It's in all the shops areas as well as the 1st floor corridors. It was used a lot in shop-type instances, not just vocational schools, but other shops that we designed back then, because it holds up so well to tools falling on it, et cetera. But it really is not the proper flooring material to have in the building, and it has that oily smell throughout, which is contributing to the poor air quality. These panels hang in the cafeteria space on the 3rd floor, as well as on all the upper levels of all the classrooms for acoustical purposes. They have signs all over them that say asbestos product do not touch. The fear is that if a plumber or an electrician has to put a wire in that's failing in the building and accidentally drills through this, you've now put this material airborne, and you would have an incident that you would have to evacuate the school for. The next slide shows the gymnasium. This membrane floor that was put in the 70s, believe it or not, had mercury in it as a byproduct, and we know we're not supposed to dispose of our mercury thermostats, so the byproducts of mercury that are in the rubber floor that is now peeling and the seams are lifting, you can't get this material anymore, obviously. This needs to be replaced. The drinking fountain is just showing a regular flush drinking fountain that a handicapped wheelchair cannot access. So all the drinking fountains we put in now are cantilevered off the wall for full access. The fire alarm system, although existing, again, is not an addressable fire alarm. It's just one panel with one light per one large section. It's not good for the protection of the firemen or the proper saving of the building if an alarm was to go off. And this is a typical electrical panel, of which most of the panels and the breakers in the building, you cannot even get these parts anymore. So there's obviously a concerned feeling that if something was to fail, that they would not be able to bring some of these sections back up electrically. The rooftop units, again, most are nearing 40 years old. Just some examples. Fortunately, the unit on the right, although they've replaced fans and belts and motors and shivs, these are inside rooftop penthouses, but you can see, even under protection, not roof exposed, just over time, the material just wears out, things start to rust, the moisture gets to it, and that's why that was also included in the proposal package to replace the system throughout. The exterior doors are shown, the single pane glazing on the windows. The next slide shows there's water on the roof. It's not unusual to have water on a roof, but this membrane roof has what's just a 2-inch of urethane insulation. We're now required to have a minimum of 4 inches of what they call polyisocyanurate, because it's a much denser foam insulation. So that foot traffic that walked over to work on this unit for the last 40 years depresses the rubber, causes the water to pond, and then that causes the leaks. It works its way under the seams. So that would be replaced. Just some of the seams are shown to the right. And lastly, for my portion of the presentation, just showing the exterior stairs, this 40 years of exposure. The stairs, however, do not meet current handicapped codes. And the handicap code isn't just for a person that's in a wheelchair. It's for an ambulatory care person, such as Mary Jo is exhibiting tonight with her cast, where she fell off a sidewalk and broke her own foot. The stairs have to be at a proper angle with the front riser sloped back, proper rails. Those would be replaced. And lastly, the parking lots, they throw money after it, and they have for 20 years, good money every spring trying to fix up the cracks. But what it really needs after all these years is to have that all ground up, scarify the surface, redo the subbase, and then you'll get a parking lot that'll last many, many more years.
Good evening. George Garabedian, School Business Administrator. The next slide, 22, is a project budget recap. The first highlighted box shows you the total project budget of $65,310,211. The second highlighted box is showing the MSBA reimbursement amount of $50,088,000 based on the 76.84% rate that the MSBA has committed to us. So reducing the total budget by the reimbursement amount of $50 million, in addition, the amount paid by Greater Lowell Tech from its available funds for the feasibility study of $191,000 leaves a remaining balance of $15,030,000 to be shared by the 4-member communities. Excuse me. The City of Lowell's share of that $15 million project cost represents 67.43%, or $10,135,285. With the projected interest over the 20 years, it brings that up to $14,932,910. As you can see on the bottom, below the page, you see the cost of the other member communities, and that again is financed over 20 years. The next page, slide 24, showing you the capital assessment methodology. This is per the regional agreement, and it states that the capital costs shall be apportioned among the member communities annually based on school population. and the school population is defined as the number of pupils residing in a member municipality who are enrolled in grades 1 through 12 inclusive in any public, private, or parochial school, wherever it's located, and that's based on October 1st enrollment. The box on the right in the yellow shows you 2 years of the allocation based on the enrollment data that was obtained from the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. As you can see, under October 1 of 11, there's a 67.43% reflective of the city of Lowell. And even though Lowell's enrollment in the school at this point is 73.6%, just in the school. The next page is just a little bullets on the financing strategy. Obviously, borrowing rates are remaining at an all-time lows to our advantage. We would plan to issue short-term notes as needed at the start of the project. We're looking to bond approximately $10 million at the start of the construction in April of 2014, and the balance of approximately $5 million at the end of the project. And we would planning on borrowing that at a 20-year level principal payments, which is a declining debt schedule. The next page is a 5-year projection by community. And as you can see, nothing in 2013. In 2014, there's a total of approximately $58,000, and that's low because of just doing temporary borrowings that start the project. And as the project ramps up with issuing debt, increases to $900,000 in 15, $880,000 in 16, up to $1,346,500 in total in 2018, and then it declines thereafter. As you can see, Lowell's share of that cost starts out at approximately $39,000 in 2014 to a high of almost $908,000 in 2018. The next slide, 27. This is the projected debt service by community, which illustrates more to you the cost over the 20 years allocated amongst the 4-member communities. And that again is, we're utilizing a 4% interest rate for the 10 million bonds in 2014, and then a 5% bonds in 2017. We think it's a conservative rate assumption, considering the current bond rates are approximately 3%. So we do have a factor in there, and hopefully it'll be below that. The next slide is, this is just a 5-year projection. I wanted to know what's it going to cost the homeowner, what's the impact to the homeowner. With the average single-family home valued at $219,104 in fiscal year 12, and the average tax bill approximately $3,236. The cost for the project is approximately, in FY14, it goes from $1.18 per year to the high in FY18 at $27.31. And again, that's the peak year, and it'll be declining thereafter. The last slide here I have is just a comparison. I wanted to show you the cost, the per square foot cost of the various renovation projects that are out there in the MSBA pipeline. As you can see, Greater Lowell is down near the bottom, even with a 505,000 square foot gross square footage. Our project cost is $129 per square foot. We're not looking to renovate every piece of the facility. We're looking at the necessary infrastructure and upgrade repairs. There's a lot of the facility, there's concrete block that is not in bad shape. It does not need to be renovated, and I think that helps keep our costs down. And with that, I'd like to turn that back over to the superintendent.
So basically, in conclusion, we are here to ask for your support, for the City of Lowell's support toward this project. The major scope of the work being done is really what we consider necessary work at this point in time. We've done so much of the work over the years on our own, but it's just gotten bigger than us, and we're not able to continue to maintain the building on our own without these major renovations. We're looking to make the facility safer, obviously more energy efficient, and we do think it's the ideal time to leverage the MSBA for the grant funding of the $50 million that they're offering us at this time. We're worried that delaying the project could cost the folks in our communities more money. Without the 77% of reimbursement from the communities, a bulk of the work will have to be done in short time, at which time we would have to assess our communities their share of 100% of the cost, and that's certainly something that we want to avoid in light of the fact that the state is willing at this point in time to give us a considerable sum of money to support the project. So it's our hope that we get another 40 years out of the building after we complete the necessary renovations and repair work at this time, and in order to continue to serve the 4 communities that send us their kids every year. So thank you very much for your time. We appreciate it. And if anyone has any questions, we'd be happy to try to answer those for you now.
Thank you. Councilor Kennedy?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just have a few questions. Have you made this presentation to every community?
We have made, we've been to Tingsboro. Tingsboro has already approved and committed to their share of the project, as well as Dunstable. We will be attending a Drake-it town meeting on November 5th, where we will present the project at that town meeting. We have presented it for the select board, and we've been there a couple of times with smaller groups, but we will be in front of the town meeting November 5th, which we anticipate they will be asking the voters for special election for debt exclusion. That's what we've been told by the Drake-it folks is the plan at this time, but they do have to present that at a town meeting.
Is town meeting able to approve it, or are you saying they have to have a special election for it?
Drake-it would have to have a special election for the override, correct?
Okay. So you're just waiting on the city council and
Drake-it,
the vote by Drake-it?
correct.
Okay, and if we vote to approve it and Drake-it, and it doesn't work out at this special election, then that's it. You need everybody.
We need 100%, correct.
Okay. And you need an answer from the city council by the end of January?
We need a vote in, what's the date, Judge? 30 days. We have to obtain approval from all of our communities by the end of January to get back to MSBA. But the vote for, has to, go ahead.
I believe you have 30 days from the date that the school committee voted the authorization, 30 days if you were going to disapprove.
Right.
And so when does that 30 days expire?
It'll be, let's see, the committee voted October 11th, so I believe 30 days would be like November 10th.
How are you going to get Drake-it's vote by then? I mean, certainly they're not going to set up if you get approval at town meeting for a special election, they're not going to have that by then.
No, there's an additional language on the vote that the school committee took that if a community were going to a debt exclusion, that they would have 90 days to obtain that vote.
Okay. Thanks.
Any further discussion? Councilor Mercier?
I don't know if I'm Santa Claus or the boogeyman, because the people watching this tonight first are going to realize that we just gave them a 5% increase in the water sewer bill. If we support this, it's a $14 million bond that we have to appropriate the money for the next 20 years. And then on top of it, no doubt the manager's going to present his capital improvement slash 4.2 million or whatever that'll be. So I think I probably should have stayed home again, but I know that we do have bills, and we're the people that have to sit here and make the determination, and I know that I will tell you that my children did go to the Voc school, and it's a remarkable school, and of course it's old, and with old things, you need to repair things. You can't just let it go. I understand that. But I feel like I'm just the bearer of bad news tonight with the people that are at home watching. But these are the things we have to do, and they're waiting for a vote, I guess.
Council Martin, then Council Lori.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First, I would, I assume, Mr. Manager, that these projections about the annual increase are not in our capital plan, at least as of now.
No, they're not in our capital plan, and they're not in our 5-year forecast. But based upon the, whatever action is taken, they will be incorporated into that 5-year forecast so that we can plan ahead for that. And we are in a good position right now as we look out over the next few years, based upon the work that's been done to work this in a way that is affordable.
Right, but I guess my point is, and I appreciate the having this projection, because it does break out the actual cost per taxpayer, but it's not necessarily an increase over what it would otherwise be. It could be, but we may be able to work it into our existing plans.
Correct.
So I think, I don't know if that's of some comfort to some folks or not. I think the other thing I'm concerned about is this, the $50 million state reimbursement, because that does present a good opportunity, and I think the students in Lowell have benefited greatly from the school building assistance program. We're all very proud of the work that's been done here over the last 20 years with school buildings, and it's been in large measure the work of the Mass School Building Assistance Bureau, the legislature that authorizes that funding, and we've taken advantage of it better than anywhere. There are only 1 or 2 older buildings left, and there's this one. So, I mean, there's $50 million of state funding on the table. To get that, we have to pay our $15 million. So, but then if we didn't approve this, there are these $30 million or so, about half of the project cost, in critical needs. Now, could that come back through the assessment process?
It would come back to the assessment process, depending upon how much the school was able to do each year, and it would come back in the way of an assessment. It wouldn't come back in the way of I don't think it would come back in the way of a loan order if there was because that would require, I suppose it could come back in the way of a loan order. Once again, it would be similar, a project would be brought forward, but it would come back in the way of an assessment, similar to this, but
right, but we need to approve
but it would be
debt.
Without the, right.
We have to approve debt, but we don't get to approve the assessments.
That's correct.
And if those were deemed critical by who? By the school committee or by the Department of Education? Who makes that determination?
Well, I think it would be by the school department, by the Voc would make that determination to, for instance, spend the money to replace the roof, and they could, if it were $2 million to replace that roof, they could have the option of going out to borrow that money and then coming back and asking for that, or they could simply move forward and place that on as an assessment. And then we don't have much in the way of choices on that.
Right, and so that's my concern. We have, for a $15 million expenditure over 20 years, we're able to leverage $50 million in state aid, which we've done in every single school, almost every single school here in the city for the benefit of the students here. most of the enrollment here are Lowell students. The one thing that not a criticism, but the one disappointment I'd have of this, it really doesn't add the ability to take any more students, because I think there's a desire still for more students to attend this school. But certainly, this has been, I guess you have to weigh pros and cons of what you can get approved at MSBA, and that seems to have been very carefully thought out and done. So I think, like almost all the other school projects in the city, this merits not just consideration, but approval, because I think it's a matter of fairness. I think the city council and prior city councils have stepped up in a big way to make investments for the benefit of almost all the students in Lowell, and this would be similar to that.
And Councilor Noon.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I concur with Councilor Martin. The opportunity to have the state money available at this point, and listening to the manager, excuse me, saying we were in pretty good financial shape at the time. But I'm also listening to Councilor Mercier talking about what we voted on earlier and the capital plan coming down the line. What makes Lowell unique, I think, compared to the other communities, is they have town meetings where they actually vote on it, where Lowell is just a council. The only thing I could think of is if you wanted to have a special meeting, you want to have a subcommittee meeting. We did an educational tonight. The public would have an opportunity to come in to speak before that time. And I don't know how the other members feel, but as far as reaching out to the public for their support, that might be the only alternative we have compared to the towns. It would have to be up and running real quick, which really I don't think is a problem, but those are my only concerns with the public meeting.
Councilor Noon and Councilor Leahy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The superintendent, I have a question through you, Mr. Mayor, through the superintendent. I heard through your presentations, Superintendent, that you indicated that this plan was in the pipeline for a while. I heard you said 2008. Is that even before that?
Yeah, that's when the process began.
Right. Is this plan, was this plan shared with the previous council? This is more or less, this is what the Great Lowell want to do, and we plan to do this. We will, from time to time, update you, or is this the first time you present it to the council and want answers by November 10?
It's the first time we've made a formal presentation to this council. We have been talking to the communities all along about the need for the work as we walked through the process with MSBA. The process simply takes this long, believe it or not, to get from start to finish. And we did through some of our municipal dinners where we invited from all 4 of our municipalities, critical folks and finance people and counselors, and talking about the need for the upgrades in the building, explaining the upgrades that we were doing from year to year on our own and the cost of those upgrades. But as far as a formal presentation with the overall number, we hesitated to do anything because we didn't have approval from the state. We didn't have the approval of the project itself, the scope of the project, and what they were willing to fund and support. So there have been, I would say, informal conversations on an ongoing basis, probably more so the last year or two, as we began to realize how big the project was growing from an initial thought about needing a new roof and HVAC rooftop units to what the actual overall need would be in terms of MSBA and state requirements to get the project funded.
When did you get the approval from the MSBA?
October 3rd this year, this past October 3rd.
Okay. Through you, Mr. Mayor, maybe to you, I'd like to see this, I'd like to see an analysis from the manager that including in his capital plans. I want to support this, but I would want to see analysis built in, the capital plan built into this, and from you, Mr. Manager, before I even, consider it. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councilor Leahy and then Councilor Kennedy.
Sure, thank you. Through you, I had a couple of questions. Just going through this, is this the first proposal? Was it trimmed down at all, or?
Initially, we had 3 different options that we were looking at. One was the critical need option. As a board, as a school committee and a school building committee, we were looking at the critical need issues, I guess you could say the kind of the middle of the road issues that would not have included the new cafeteria. And then as we finished with the MSBA, and they really were warning us to make sure that we took care of all the needs at once, because they would not entertain another statement of interest from us for a very long time, is when we started to look at, I guess what you'd call the total project. All of it was what we considered to be sorely needed items, except for the addition of the cafeteria, which came up as we discovered that our science labs did not meet with state requirements, not in number or in size or space.
Okay. As a few councils has indicated, I mean, it's a great time, it's a great situation with what the state's going to offer. The only thing that kind of bothers me is, and maybe I'm not understanding it right, but for years we fought for the high school, Lowell High School, to have good science labs, and that seemed to take forever for us. We went back to the table, I don't know how many times, to try to get our science labs up to date. And I understand that you need that. The cafeteria, I'm just not sure about, why. Could you explain again why
Sure.
that would help? Because
Sure.
I think at our high school, we must have 4 or 5 lunches.
Right. And if you were to approach the MSBA at this point in time for assistance with the project at the high school, they would tell you that they would want you to do something to get those lunches reduced down to 3, which is what they told us. Because they do ask, you have to fill out a ton of paperwork, but there are questions around the educational process and procedures at the school. And they recommended to us that we find a way to serve lunch within the 3 seating time frame, which is impossible for us to do with the setup. We have 2 cafeterias on the 3rd floor of the building, and we have open space in the entranceway to the school in the mall area, the open mall area. We have a cafeteria set up off that open mall area where kids can go for lunch any of the 5 periods, but to accommodate all of them, the food is prepared in the kitchen on the 1st floor and brought up the elevators to the 3rd floor for those 2 dining areas, and all 3 areas are utilized for 5 lunch periods. The state requested that we take care of, through this project, making sure that we could seat all kids for lunch within 3, which led to the discussion about putting up a new building that would allow us to do that, and taking over the existing cafeteria space to create 6 new science labs. We currently have 7 science labs. The 6 new ones will give us 13 total, and will allow us to also renovate the current labs we have to meet code and build the new ones to meet the code as well. And back in the day, I sound old, but I have been in the building for 35 years, and we didn't offer a lot of science options when we first opened the school. Our primary purpose was to get kids ready for the world of work. That was our primary goal, our primary purpose. With the oncoming of ed reform and the MCAS testing and having to have all students now college ready, including technical schools, we've had to expand our science offerings as well as some of our other academic offerings, and we're offering lab sciences in regular classroom space, trying to do virtual chemistry labs and get creative, but we really don't have the lab space we need to meet the state's initiative around the STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math.
One other question, how much work does the state allow you to work on your own building? Like some of these things, I'm wondering why they couldn't be done with students,
No.
floors, windows,
No.
handicap accessible. You can't do any of that work on the building itself?
No.
But I mean, you can go out into the community and do it, but you can't do
Yeah,
it.
well, we do it with instructors out in the community, light work. We don't do any major construction projects or reconstruction projects or major renovation projects out in the community. We do lighter types of work with instructors who are licensed to do that kind of work. But I know, yeah, Kevin? Yeah,
It just
I
seems
see
like
you
it would be a way to
wiggling
trim
around it.
down the cost.
No, we have had other communities ask that question. You're not.
Yeah, okay.
Go ahead, Kevin.
I think one of the things the council was asking, we did look at the building from a number of parameters. One would be, which the state always asks, what will it cost to replace this building? Can you save money by replacing it? Well, to build this building new, it would be north of $165 million based on the square footage. And we also looked at not adding the CAF, but since we had to upgrade the science labs under the new science lab initiative, and a lot of this is very, very new, including the science lab initiative, but to get to the 13 labs, the addition of science labs in a separate addition to the building would be $10 or $12 million more than what the cafeteria is costing. So by vacating that space that's acting as a cafeteria, those can be much more economically renovated into science labs within the footprint of the building, and then the square foot cost of adding the cafeteria is significantly less than having to add science labs. So there is about a $10 million or plus savings just in doing that. And again, it meets the three seating requirement.
All right, it just, all right. It's a tough one because, with our own high school, we've been fighting for a lot of this for years. And I understand that the VOC has the opportunity to do this and it's a good financial deal for them. But do we have anything like other cafeteria requirements? Is that required for all schools now, or is that something that's, how does that work?
Mr. Manager?
I believe, and actually, Kevin may have better answer on this, but I believe that the cafeteria requirements get triggered once you get into a school building assistance project. So if you're going to take advantage of the money, then they put the requirements on. Now, they've become more flexible about that. Their requirements used to be much more extensive, but under the reforms that were put in place a few years back, they became much more willing to do things like renovation as opposed to new construction. But they do have certain requirements as to, how many science labs, what type of science labs, the cafeteria space, all of those things that really hit at the educational program.
All right, thank you.
Council Kennedy?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Could I ask, the cafeteria itself, the 15,000 square feet, how much is that? If you were to isolate that from the rest of the project, how much would that be? How much does that represent?
I think it was about $6 million between the hard cost of construction and the soft cost. Everything has to be looked at in terms of what's the hard construction number and then what's the soft cost for fees and everything added in. So I think it's around $6 million.
Okay. It's just surprising to me that in a school that's 500,000 square feet, that there's not enough cafeteria space. I mean, you know what I mean? Just because that's a big building.
It is a big building, and it was just designed 1974. We're approaching 40 years. There was so much about design back then, about what we could do and what we couldn't do, how things were looked at. They're tearing down numbers of high schools that at that time were being built with what they called their open plan. No walls between rooms, and these open use plans that just acoustically were a nightmare, and they're tearing those down now like they did in North Andover and build a brand new high school.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor, I think, you know, I have to agree with Councilor Martin. I mean, you know, one of the things that happens with these school projects is that you get the reimbursement. And so, you know, the $50 million is significant. And, you know, we, along with the other communities in the district, have a responsibility to keep that building in shape. And so, although it seems like a lot of money, when you consider what we're getting from the state, from the Commonwealth, it really isn't all that bad. On the other hand, this is coming to us, and I've heard rumblings about this project, but it's coming to us, and we're asked to kind of make a decision on it in relatively short order. And I would be a lot more comfortable doing that, and I feel like I have a responsibility to ask the city manager for, as Councilor Nunes did, that for a report on what the financial impact is going to be to the city. And so if we can get that in a week or something like that, then I think that's a good way to go. I just would feel a lot more comfortable with this vote. I want to support this project, but I feel like doing so without knowing, other than to have you say, well, we're in pretty good shape, without having, I'd like a little bit more than just that. So if we can get some sort of a report on what the impact will be in a week's time, I think that would be beneficial, probably to everybody here.
Mr. Manager.
Counselor, I believe I said we're in very good shape, but that's not a problem. In fact, Mr. Moses and I were just discussing it. He's been updating the forecast with the new information. We do this on a regular basis, and that's not a problem. We can have that for the council for next Tuesday night.
Thank you.
Councilor Laurie and then Councilor Elliott.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. If we could have that report, but also a report on the capital plan, what that's going to mean, along with the water and sewage.
All of that's included in the forecast. The capital budget that's here is already included in the forecast, and obviously there needs to be a vote on that each year. But the water, and we now we'll be updating the forecast too on actually the 5% was already in the wastewater forecast, so that's not a problem either.
In that capital plan, I looked it over. They talked about the football field. Now, we had talked about the track earlier. Councilor Lay had talked about the track last week. When I looked at the capital plan, it mentioned the football field. Was that meant to mean the track? I meant to ask that tonight.
I'll have to check on that. I believe that was a number that was generated for us by the school department, and I'm not sure whether that included the track or the entire facility, so I'll have to...
The football field and the track itself. Right. Okay.
I believe it was in all likelihood, it was probably just the redoing of the field, but we can, I know that we're working on numbers on the track as well, and these are the things that come up during the year that we will now blend into our capital budget for the future. So.
Okay, thank you. That's what I wanted, was the entire package.
Councilor Elliott.
Thank you. I'll support the motion for a report, but Mr. Manager, my concern is how we're going to pay for it, and I know it doesn't kick in until 2014, and I think I understand where you're coming from in 2014 when I look at the debt schedule and what will be retired in 2014, but my concerns are after that. I mean, there's $3.7 million that mature in 2014. With 2015, there's very little. I don't see anything in 2016, 2017. There's again very little. So, and then when I look at the debt schedule on this, in those years, we're looking at just for the city, 600, 730. 2018 is $1 million that will be loaded onto this debt schedule. So maybe, and I look in 2018, there's only 30,000 being retired. So I think it'd be important to get that. It would be important to get that breakdown, or unless there's some additional information that you can provide us. But to me, it seems we're adding. There's not a lot of debt retiring after 2014 to compensate for this.
Great.
All right, thank you.
Councilman Donza.
It's always difficult to spend money, but, I mean, as they stated, this is about to become a 40-year-old school, and they haven't asked for much in the way of maintenance other than ordinary maintenance in these 40 years. There's going to come a time where we either need to pony up a major renovation or we need to replace the school. And to me, it's, given what's been presented to us, it's not that hard a decision. We're being asked, are we willing to spend 16 cents on a dollar to completely renovate a school that serves a large portion of our high school age students? I remember when I entered high school, that was the very same year that this school opened. They vacated what is now the Freshman Academy. And in mid-year, we as freshmen moved downtown into the space. And quite frankly, it was deplorable. I don't know how it was used for an educational setting at all. It's since been renovated twice, first into the City and Arts Magnet School, and more recently to hold the Freshman Academy. I think it's money we need to invest in our future, because that's what the students are. And education is always an investment. It's not an expense. And I can't see us passing up the $50 million just because we're worried about paying the $1 million a year. We have a $300 million budget. This is 1/3 of 1% of that budget. I'm sure we can find a way to do this. So to me, it's not going to be a very difficult decision. It's something that just simply needs to be done, and we're going to have to do it for the future of our city. Thank you.
Thank you. Before we go any further, I'll just read the formal vote, and then we can entertain a motion afterwards. A motion to waive the full reading by Council Mercia, second by Council Noon. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, so voted. Reading by title in City Council vote. Authorizing Greater Lowell Technical High School repair project.
Mr. Mayor, I move we delay action for 1 week.
Motion to delay the vote for a week until receipt of a report from the city manager. Seconded by Council Lowry. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, so voted. And thank you for your presentation.
Thank you.
Next, we have, in keeping with many of these conversations, the capital plan, an update on the FY13 capital plan, and then the proposed fiscal year 2014 through 17 capital plan. Mr. Manager?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The purpose of this discussion tonight is several-fold. Really, it's just to sort of talk for some period of time tonight. I'm not requesting any decisions. It's to begin a dialogue regarding our capital investments. As you know, we about 4 or 5 years back, we developed what appears to be the first capital budget that the city has had, and we tried to build that around what would be considered a capital plan. Then the recession hit, and that sort of put some of that back, some of it on hold as we grappled with just how we were going to get through the difficult financial times. But as you know, it's always been an issue that I've tried to present to the city council, that the city really needs to invest in its infrastructure. It needs to invest in its buildings, its roads, its sidewalks, its facilities, including those that are funded through the enterprise funds. And so what we did last year is we again grew upon what had been built in prior years to lay out a capital budget and a capital, beyond a capital budget, a capital plan, beginning in FY13, which the City Council approved, but going all the way out to fiscal year 2017, like our forecast that goes out 5 years. I think we've accomplished a great deal already this year in terms of implementing the capital budget that was approved by the City Council, as well as other funding that we have. Just to give you an update on where we are with many of these projects, and I'm sure I'll miss a few along the way, but in terms of overall improvements to our, as you know in the document that I provided to the council for this meeting, I gave you a memo that reported on all the different school improvements. We've done, and I'll just go through these if that would be all right with the council. We've done painting at the Rogers, McAuliffe, Butler, Lincoln, Malloy, Greenhouse, Riley, Bartlett schools. We've installed new floor tiles at the Robinson, McAuliffe, and Wang schools. Restroom walls, and these were all done by our Land and Buildings department. Restroom walls were repaired at the Riley. Masonry work was completed at the Daly, Wang, and Green. Plumbing was updated at the Greenhouse, Robinson, McAuliffe, Wang, Malloy, Riley, and Stocklosa. We've also done a number of MSBA projects, similar to what the same funding source that the vocational school was just in on. We've done projects, roof replacement at the high school at Colburn Hall, roof replacement at Moody, roof replacement at Riley, roof replacement at Washington. I know we're still planning on doing some window work at the Washington too, but the Washington school boiler was replaced. Using school department or the capital budget. At Greenhouse, we put in new flooring, VCT flooring. At the Butler, we've put on a new rubber gym floor. At the Lincoln, we've put the new restroom stalls on the lower level. At the Lowell High School, and this is really just an amazing, I'd certainly encourage people to take a look at this if they have a chance. The flooring work done, a number of locations in the high school, including flooring at the second floor of the Colburn, VCT flooring, a number of classrooms and hallways. The Little Theater was carpeted. We've painted and floored the McAuliffe. We've recarpeted the Shaughnessy School Administration and Kindergarten wing. The Sullivan School has new lockers. The Stocklosa has restroom and hall painting. The Freshman Academy has new restroom floors. The Riley School has a new school. The Wang, we have a new phone system. The Rogers, we've done electrical work, window and ceiling repairs, and 8 new classrooms were outfitted. And in the near future, we have a number of projects that are in the pipeline and ready for completion. New bleachers will be at the Greenhouse by this next month. The Lincoln, the same, new bleachers. Rogers, new bleachers. All of these happening in November. The Moody School will have new roofs in the spring. The Washington School will have new windows in the spring. And the Lowell High School door replacements, we have that out to bid, and bids are due on that. At the Butler and Robinson, we have out to bid or under construction the installation of new hot water heaters, the replacement of 3 compressors at the Pine School, the replacement of the library roof at the Daly, the repair of roof skylights at Greenhouse and McAvenue. Exterior doors were replaced at the Robinson. The restrooms have been renovated at the Riley. A major problem that we've had throughout all of our schools is those of us who went on the tour saw that we have drinking fountains and restroom petitions needing work throughout numerous schools. And we have a number of HVAC projects that are underway across the system as well. So you can see in the schools, which were the major issue last spring, there's been quite a bit of work that's taken place. I would venture to say that this is, and the superintendent is here tonight, I would venture to say that the work that we've done at the schools is probably the greatest accumulation of work that's been done in a number of years. And it's really been a cooperative effort of the Land and Buildings crew, the school department, getting projects out to bid and getting that work done. A couple of the capital projects.
Councilor Kennedy?
Just while we're on this, Mr. Manager, I think it's commendable, the work that's been done over in the schools. And if you recall, when we did the tour, one of the things that we spoke about was maybe hiring kids for the summer to do some of the punch list type items that would be non-technical stuff like painting and so forth and so on. And we didn't get to do that this summer, but it might be a good idea for next summer if we could do that. I think in the long run, it would save the city a lot of money. I think that it also provides employment, summer employment for many of the young kids in the city, and it's worthwhile trying at least on a one-year basis to see how it turns out. And if it's more trouble than what it's worth, then maybe we could discontinue it. But I think at least to try it on a pilot basis next summer would be worthwhile. So maybe that's. I think when we did the tour, the time was short before the summer was coming, but certainly if we start planning for that now, and I know that you have to work out something with the unions in order to do that, but certainly if we started planning on that now, we should be able to have that for next summer.
It's an idea that we have explored in the past, we explored this year, and we're working through a number of issues to see if we can make something like that happen. It has a number of benefits, absolutely.
Thank you.
On the other capital projects, just
a minute.
I'm sorry.
Councilor Leahy.
Thank you. If you don't mind, if I can just comment while on the schools. It is commendable, all the work we've been getting done. My only thing is that we just need to improve communication, I think, between the city side and the school side, because as you know, for years, we've really been trying to get a list together and trying to get some of these projects done, and I understand, the constraints. But I just think we need to do a better job of communicating with the work order system. I think the school department needs some credit with their fees system that they've set up using the gyms, because the school department has replaced the bleachers and the floors, right?
Correct.
So, we have to give them credit for coming up with that.
Absolutely.
And doing, I guess I don't want to say doing their share, but sharing the cost. And we take a lot of flack over that because people don't always think that they need to pay the fees to use the schools, but this is where the money goes to, upkeep for the floors and the bleachers. So as we move forward, I would like to see a better line of communication and a little more progress made, because over the years, even though we have painted and done some repairs, it does get to the point where it's really, it shouldn't be in the shape that it is. I mean, when my daughter entered the high school last year, we got in there and I pushed for it and we got the walls painted. But it was in tough shape. I mean, there were holes in the walls and it still needs to be finished painted. Is it better than it was? Yes. But it gets to the point where it's awful to send the kids in there, and we should have a better plan and a better maintenance program. Thank you.
Mr. Manager?
If I may, Council, just in response, I think that there certainly have been issues in the past. I think, though, that over the last couple of years, the communication with Assistant Superintendent Lang, Brian Curley, Jim Green, Ralph Snow they've been meeting on a regular basis to go over projects. There is a work order system that is being implemented. It hasn't been, we aren't there yet, but it is being implemented that I think will address many of those. At the end of the day, it's the resources. What resources we have. And again, that's where the capital budget comes in, that it allows us to go in and make the investments that we need to make. But I agree that the schools, all of our facilities, really we have to invest in them, because it just becomes more costly in the long run. It's many of the schools in the city, everyone talks about the school projects that have been conducted over the last 20 years. What an investment that's been. But it's important to note that, as the architect pointed out tonight about the roof, a roof lasts 20 years. Many of these buildings now that were renovated 20 years ago are now coming up on a point in time when they need more new investment. And that's why it's important that we continue to maintain these. So I agree with you completely on that. The other two projects I just wanted to talk about in the capital, to give an update, the City Hall windows are going out to bid. Those are expected to be construction taking place in the spring of 2013. And those should improve the appearance of the building and be more efficient for the city. And then there's the signalized intersections. We have a combination of money, roughly about $1.1 million. That we're doing work on improvements at the school in Pawtucket, Westford School, University of Riverside, and a new signal at Lawrence and Church, and some upgrades. And I know this has been an issue that a number of councilors have, we've talked about quite a bit in terms of improving the signalization throughout the city and making it more synchronized. So this goes a long way towards addressing that. So I think we're making real progress on implementing what's out there. The issue that I just wanted to put out to you right now is that for fiscal year 2014, we have slated, built into our forecast, just under $5.5 million of investment. We're not looking for a vote tonight, but I wanted to bring it to the council's attention that we have, a substantial amount of work again at the schools, but also at a couple of the fire stations and some road type work that we're looking to put out there. Given the discussion that we had earlier regarding the Voc School, we're going to go back and we're going to work in the Voc School project along with this to see, that will adjust how much we're able to put into capital. If we're going to maintain the same revenue stream that we're projecting. And that, I believe, shows a 2% increase in taxation. And these are rough numbers. These have to be worked out. But I believe it's a 2% to 2.5% increase in taxation on average, which is in line with what communities generally do. But certainly we recognize the City Council's desire to hold the line on taxation as well. So we're working on a number of strategies to make that happen over the next year or so. Lastly, what will be brought to you in the very near future is the master plan. And what I've handed out to you tonight is a listing of a number of issues that are included within the master plan that really are intended to direct the future of the city, of where, based upon citizen input, as well as input received from the council through meetings, working with neighborhood organizations, business groups, etc. These are all included within the master plan and guide us is not only for where we see development happening in the city, but also what we see for the city making investment in itself. So I'll stop at this point and I'd be happy to take any questions or anything you want us to look at in particular beyond the Voc School incorporation as we work on the capital plan for next year.
Any discussion? Councilor Mercia.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to the city manager. So are you asking us to contribute to your wish list?
The short answer could be we do that almost every week in a way, but certainly, yes, I'd like you to contribute to the wish list of projects you'd like to see, and so we can look at those. For instance, the track at Colley. We can work that in and see how that fits in and how it fits into the overall priorities if we're to hold the line on how much we spend and how much we tax. The other part of it is, beyond projects that the council would like to see, some sense from the council on decisions regarding levels of taxation. Beyond just we don't want taxes to go up, that's always doable, but it may not be, what my result from it is that we aren't able then to make the investments that people would like to see us make. Or we may have to tweak services. It all is it's all a calculation that we have to make. And clearly we look to save money on our operations and we look to save money on our the way we do projects. and we look for other revenue sources, but we want to look at it sort of big picture of what direction should the city head?
Do we not have the opportunity to get any of that Mass Building Assistance Association money, or is that dried up now? And
We were able to get some of it. We've gotten some of it for different projects that are listed in the capital, in the memo that I provided to the council, like the roof replacements. And we've been able to tap into some money that came out through the ARA project to do energy improvements. So we've been able to do that, and that came through the MSBA. But when you're going to do you really have to do a full, it's like the vocational school. They're not doing just a roof. They're looking, once they get into it, they need to do a whole project. To make itself competitive to get that money, you have to do a project. So if you recall when we did the Maury a few years back, that was a whole project, and we opted at that time to do the Maury and not to do the Butler School on Gorham Street at the same time.
at one time, it used to be a 90-10 split. Then it got to be a 70-30 split. What is the split today?
I believe it's about 70-30, 75-25. It's no longer a set percentage.
Okay.
Lowell was always a 90% community. It now is a base percentage, and then they give you more points, more percentages based upon your maintenance, and a number of other types of.
Now, let me talk about the windows in City Hall. To me, this is historic, because is there not any grant money from the Historic Preservation Grant? Nothing out there like that?
No, and we already have the money set aside for that, and we're moving forward with it. What we did is we had some savings in different aspects of the Amoresco project, savings in some other energy-related grants, and then the appropriation from the city council. And so we think we'll be able to do this, pretty much this whole building by the spring.
That's what happens when you have old buildings. You have
Absolutely.
to maintain it, and so it's tough for us to sit here to support this, but somebody has to do it, and somebody has to pay, and so we do the best we can here.
And Council, I think that, if I may, Mr. Mayor, Council, I think that that's really what we're trying to do is we could put these budgets together, and I know as the council reviews these, is balance. Balance the investments, balance the revenue needs, balance the services that we have to provide or we want to provide. So we try to do that. Thank you.
And just in further response to your question about the school building authority, the superintendent and I have actually met in the last year with the building authority to look at potentially some science lab projects through that science lab initiative that was referenced earlier. So that's something that's maybe on the horizon as well.
Thank you.
Council Leahy, and then Council Kennedy.
Thank you. I just, as you were saying, this handout that we just got, there's a lot of good stuff in here, and this is the stuff we should be looking at. And as Councilor Mercy had mentioned, I assume we are looking at all aspects, grants, people to help clean up the riverways, the canals. A few years ago, we tried to look into there was some federal money out there for safe routes to schools, and they could pay for the signage. So all things like that, I'm sure that, we are looking at it, and we need to be aggressive. Just this list alone there's a lot of great stuff in here.
Right.
And this is what we need to be doing, reassessing our neighborhoods, looking at the signage, cleaning up the infrastructure, looking at the Rourke Bridge. So I look forward to working with you on this.
Mr. Manager.
Councilor, thank you. And there are some tremendous projects here, and just to allay any fears that we're going to come forward with some major multi-million-dollar projects that, for instance, completing the Concord River Greenway. I think we all value that project, but it's not something the city can do itself. That's something we need to have the state, federal agencies, or private come forward with that type of project. And or the Rourke Bridge, But, so, many of these are grant-funded, but they drive, these sort of lays out what we're trying to, based on, again, on input we've received, that will be in the master plan that's put before you, what direction we're heading to try to knock these off and build a city based around that. Thank you.
Councilor Kennedy?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a couple of things. First of all, the next time that we come up with a capital plan budget, I know Council Leahy would never say anything, but it would be good to have an updated cover.
My notes.
Sorry, that was a promise I made to Councilor Broderick to leave his name on it. So,
Second thing is just in order, because I think what I am interested in is holding the taxes. And so I would be interested in doing as much as we can, but holding the taxes. And if we are in real good shape instead of just pretty good shape, we should be able to do quite a bit and still hold the taxes. And that would be, for my part, that's what I'm interested in. On the reimbursements, my recollection is that when we did the high school addition, the reimbursement was 65-35. When the 11 schools were built, that was a 90-10. But I believe that 90% came from the federal government, and it wasn't state money. I think that was a 90-10 with the state paying for those schools, those 11 schools that were all built at one time. And so it occurs to me that since all those schools have aged together, and since it was a significant investment, that maybe we could get federal money on that stuff for those 11 schools. Not for the other schools, but for the 11. And it's, that would be something that the administration could do with the congressional office and try to do something. I mean, those schools are, have some legacy value, I think. And so, and they are all, 25 years old now or so? And so they probably all need a good amount of work. And so it's worth at least trying to get some of that money to do some of those projects.
I believe it was, we can explore that further, but I believe it was state money that came in. I know that some communities, I thought Lowell was at 90-10, but I know that some communities were 90 state and received 10% federal, so they essentially got them for nothing.
I'm positive that the high school edition was 65-35.
And
the reason that I say that, the reason that I think that the 11 schools were done with federal money is because I believe that Senator Kennedy was involved in securing those funds. And that's why I say that. Okay. I don't think that I was on the council at the time when it was approved, but my understanding was that he was very involved. And I believe that, I think Dick Howe was the mayor at the time.
Good check.
And so, I'll stand by that. Maybe I am incorrect, but I can't imagine why Senator Kennedy would be involved if it wasn't federal money.
Mr. Manager?
Again, I think, obviously it's before my time, but I believe that there was some communities that received some desegregation money, and there may have been some 10% that came in that way. It may be even the 90 or part of the 90. The issue that we have, the bigger issue that we have right now with the federal government, of course, is that the future for federal funding for anything is bleak, to say the least. And so it's, but certainly that doesn't mean we don't try.
That's right.
Councilman Donta?
Well, since my kids were starting school, and we did get 90% reimbursement. I'm not counting the high school. That was before the 10 schools. There was a subsequent high school renovation where we got substantial money from. We got 90-10, and it was state funding, but we got 90% because we were under a federal consent decree. All the communities under the federal consent decree not only got the 90%, but they had their own portion of the pie to which they skipped ahead of many other communities in order to get funding at the 90% level. And it was because we were under the federal consent decree for desegregation. But I don't believe any of the funding was federal at the time, unless it passed through the state, but it came from the state. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Councilor Martin.
That, just in general on the capital plan, so I think all of us are cognizant of taxes, and no one wants tax increase, but this doesn't necessarily mean tax increases either. I think the thing to keep in mind here is that it's a prudent financial management exercise to evaluate your capital needs and to borrow money from time to time to pay for them. I think nobody wants to borrow for operating costs, but to borrow money for a project that's going to have a useful life of 20 or 30 or 40 years, maybe schools don't last 40 years anymore, but for a long period of time, it makes sense sometimes to do that. And that, the typical analogy in a household is your mortgage, right? You wouldn't want to borrow money to pay for your gas and groceries every week, but most people do borrow money to pay a mortgage because the value of that asset is going to maintain over the period of the mortgage and hopefully appreciate even. So that's what we're doing here, and it does, I think, benefit the taxpayers for us to look at the big picture of some of these items. And certainly you can't do everything. This is about priorities. Some of us are going to have different priorities than others, but I think it is a valid and prudent exercise to be investing in the future of the city through a capital plan. So I appreciate the work that's gone into this. I appreciate the money that's been spent to date in the current fiscal year, and look forward to further discussion about how these particular needs get sorted out.
Thank you. Councilor Mercia.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. May I please just make a statement here that I have a capital plan too, and the capital plan is to see a goal of putting a crosswalk down for the seniors. Now, we're not asking for this to come under the budget, because I know funds are limited, but we have a campaign similar to Move the Bus at the senior center. We have a campaign to get a crosswalk. I donated $100 the other day. We took a collection up. We got a little bit of money. I'm going to come to you with a motion pretty soon when we can get that $5,000 and ask that you put it in your capital plan for the springtime, because I think that would be what it'll be about. So if you could remember this, and we would appreciate it. Thank you. Anybody wants to donate to the Friends of the Council on Aging, any amount would do, and we're going to try to reach that goal. Thank you.
Councilor Leahy.
I think all the lumber we could sell from this weekend that fell could pay for the crosswalk. So I'll second your motion, Rita.
Thank you.
Any further discussion? Entertain a motion to accept as report of progress by Councilman Donza, seconded by Councilor Mercia. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So voted. Councilor Kennedy.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, through you to the manager. Mr. Manager, there's several reports that I'd like to see sooner than later. You'll recall a couple of months ago that you were going to come forward with a report on the state of the downtown, the LDFC report, which is required by the legislation, and that's one. And I think that's important, and I don't think it's all that hard, but there have been several buildings, several major transactions downtown. There are several buildings under new ownership. I, for one, would like to know what the intention of the buyers are in each of those transactions, and also any recommendations or insight that you could offer with that report. So that would be one. The second report was requested by Councilor Leahy and myself, having to do with inspectional services, and that's not as old, but I'd like to see that. And then the third report was requested by Councilor Mercier, and that has to do with the water department. And the situation at the water department is is bad. And I've had discussions with you about the way that place is managed and just the ongoing amount of problems that seem to arise. And of all the departments in the city, that's the department that I hear the most about. And so it would be good to get, and I understand that there's an investigation, but the investigation's an internal investigation, really, that you're doing. And so it would be good if this council could get a report on just exactly what's going to change that department around, what's going to make it better, and you know, what should happen. You know, you've got people threatening each other and so forth and so on. I mean, I don't have to, you know, talk about what's been in the paper recently, but it's significant, and it just shouldn't be.
Mr. Manager?
Counselor, the downtown report, we'll get that to you. That should be wrapping up soon, and we'll get that to you. The other one is a fairly new request. The one regarding inspectional services. You know, the deputy director recently left us, and that affects our ability really to put some of that together for you. But that should be coming very soon. You know, we do have a pretty quick turnaround with reports. I know that the downtown one is a little bit longer. We gave a preliminary report, but we'll get a more complete report to you. The water department one is one that it is under investigation. It's ongoing, but it should be wrapping up soon. And we'll be getting something out on that as well.
The last, Councilor Elliott?
Thank you. So, Mr. Manager, on the water department, you know, Council Mercy filed a motion about a month ago on the scrap metal theft, and we haven't received anything. And you know, there's been articles in the newspaper, and I don't care how the information gets out, but you know, seeing this article that I'll break your face on the front page of the newspaper is certainly not how we want the residents to have a picture of what's going on down at the water department. And you know, there's another article about, you know, relatives being hired, and I mean, what I would like to know, and I know there's litigation, I know there's an investigation going on, but I would like to know what actions you are taking in order to restore, restore some civility. I suppose when people are saying that they're intimidating people, threatening people, going down to court, charges are being filed, and one of the individuals is still there, and you have, and rightfully so, put people on leave in the past in other departments, and I don't understand why this particular individual who is still allowed to remain there. Can you answer that?
I'm not going to answer it in this forum. I can't answer it in this forum. That's a personnel matter that.
But I know, but other individuals for other offenses, I don't want to say lesser, have been put on leave.
If after an investigation it's determined that there's been wrongdoing, then yes, they are placed on leave or terminated. Not just by allegations that are made or printed in the newspaper. Now, if it turns out, if any allegation that after investigation is determined to be true, then yes, there are disciplinary actions that are taken. And I've had my share here in the city of Lowell.
Well, I mean, people, I've been in touch, people working at that water treatment plant, they should have to worry about being intimidated and being threatened either, Mr. Manager.
That's correct.
There's, by virtue of that lawsuit, that's taken place there. So isn't it incumbent upon you to take some action if this is taking place? I mean, what are you doing? I guess my question is the second time. What is?
Well, as you know, the individual that's reported as to threatening someone was was suspended without pay, immediately. In fact, it happened almost simultaneously to his being arrested.
Councilor Martin?
Okay,
Well-
I'm not done, Mr. Mayor. So I also, and I just want to ask you publicly, were the cameras not on at that water department since April?
I'm not sure exactly what your question is. I do know there are cameras there and they're on. So I'm not sure whether you're asking whether there's cameras on or whether they're, I'm not sure what your question is.
Okay, and I also just want to ask you, Mr. Manager, because you hear things. I know you teach a class at UMass Lowell. Were you
Correct.
planning on taking your class over there in light of everything that's taken place here?
Counselor,
Look, point of order.
this is not on the agenda. These are questions that are being investigated by an independent authority.
Okay, the purpose
so-
of this meeting, I just want to read the notice that you put out, Mr. Mayor, okay? The purpose of the meeting is to discuss matters pertaining to the city manager, including but not necessarily limited to. So what is it that I'm not asking
It
the
says the
manager?
purpose of the meeting is to discuss matters pertaining to the city manager, and then it lists all the different items, the sewer charge, the authorization for the Greater Lowell Technical High School repair project, the capital plan.
Mr. Mayor, I'm not going through this. I'm not going through this, charade again. The notice is posted, not limited to anything on this agenda. It's about the city manager. I'm asking the city manager a question.
Well, we'll
I
get
think it's about a very important
we'll get
issue
an
with the water
opinion from the
department.
city solicitor.
And why won't you allow this line of questioning?
Madam
I think
Sil-
that I would like to know, and I think people at home would like to know as well.
Madam Solicitor?
A couple of things. First of all, as far as the questions regarding personnel matters and disciplinary matters, that's something that is really wholly beyond the scope of the council. There are also privacy issues that are involved in that, and again, having a public discussion of these things is inappropriate. As far as and along the same lines, there were also some other questions that you raised with respect to cameras and other things. Those are things that are not necessarily being investigated by the manager or the administration. Those are things that are subject of a criminal investigation. And those are, again, having public discussions of that, I think, can be detrimental to the police investigation. Beyond that, as far as the notice and the special meeting notice is pertaining to issues regarding the manager, including but not limited to, I would suggest simply means that these are your general points of discussion. You may veer off to some degree as they are related to these issues, but that does not give you license to interpret it in the way that you are. And if it did, that would completely undermine our open meeting laws. And by that I mean, if a community merely needed to put on some magic language of including but not necessarily limited to, and then have a license to then give the public notice to discuss virtually anything, would again completely undermine the whole point of an open meeting law. The language, I'm assuming, was intended to give the council and the manager some flexibility to discuss these issues, and if something is somewhat related to it, such as the point that the Councilor Mercier had brought up with respect to a crosswalk issue, that is what I think is the including but not necessarily related to the capital plan. It wasn't something that was presented as part of the capital plan, but there is a nexus between her issue and the capital plan.
Okay, well, I think this is an important enough issue when people are being threatened at their workplace and it lands in court. So that's why I thought it was important enough. We don't meet, this meeting is to discuss capital plans and schools and sewer fees, that's fine. But I think there are also some immediate issues and pressing issues that also would take precedent. And if that is the case, then this council should be kept abreast, whether it's here, publicly, which I would prefer, or in executive session of what's taking place. I don't think that's an outrageous thing to ask.
Councilor Martin?
Yeah, well, what is outrageous, is for a counselor to make a statement about we have to restore civility at the water department and then cast a direct insult to the city manager saying he should enroll in an undergraduate course or some other course where he's a professor. So if we want to bring civility back into the government, it should start here. It should start here. Secondly, Councilor Kennedy brought up a few reports that have been pending for some time, but one of those was not Councilor Mercier's motion. Councilor Mercier's motion asked for a criminal investigation by the police department. That was approved by the council. That's ongoing. The manager might be kept informed of that, but if we're going to be demanding weekly updates in a public forum about a criminal investigation, we're not going to have too many investigations that lead anywhere. So I think, this whole discussion is completely off topic, not on the agenda, and quite frankly, not that important to the running of the city. There was an allegation made of wrongdoing. The manager took immediate action. It was reported in the paper. They seem to have enough sources at the water department that everybody's kept abreast of what's going on there. So, this is the charade right now. The charade is not the back and forth about what's on the agenda or not. It's this discussion right now. And I think this meeting has concluded its agenda. There's one more item, and we should just get to it.
Mayor, I'd like to respond. I'm not sure if you heard me correctly, Council, or not.
Counselor, you have to be recognized by
Okay,
the chair first.
I'd like to respond,
We're
Mr.
not
Mayor.
getting into a debate about this. There's already been a ruling made by the chair. If you want to appeal to the rest of the council to overturn that ruling, that's your prerogative. But at this point,
What
I
was the
think we
ruling?
ought to- The ruling was that your discussion, your line of questioning was out of order.
By whom?
The ruling by the chair.
When was that? Because that's what Council Martin said. It didn't say you. But I think I'd like to respond to him because I think he's unclear.
You're not entitled to respond,
I
Counselor.
didn't suggest the manager enroll in a
Counselor,
course.
you're not entitled to
The
respond. You're out
question
of order.
was, why was his intent to
You're out of
bring
order.
his class
You're
to
out
the
of
water
order.
department? Is that clear, Council Martin? I didn't suggest that he
Wasn't clear the
enroll in a-
first time.
Well, because I was cut off.
Counselor, you're out of order.
No, I'm not out of order, Mr. Mayor.
Yes,
I
you
just
are.
want to have an opportunity to speak. If you want to try to shut me down from speaking, then it's wrong.
Councilors, if you want this to continue week after week, by all means. But I'm making a ruling from the chair right now that the councilor is out of order. If you wish to appeal that ruling to your fellow councilors, we can do this all over again.
I appeal. What is the basis of you ruling me out of order?
We are not discussing anything on the agenda right now. Do you wish to make an appeal?
I didn't understand the statement. You said we weren't discussing anything on the agenda.
That's correct. At this point, we are going to discuss something on the agenda. That's the executive session. Executive session regarding contract negotiations with non-union personnel city auditor. And the motion would be to convene in executive session and adjourn from that executive session.
So moved.
So moved by Councilor Mercia, seconded by Councilman Donza. Any discussion?
Roll call.
Roll call.
Counselor Elliott.
No.
Counselor Kennedy.
Yes.
Counselor Leahy.
Yes.
Counselor Laurie.
Yes.
Counselor Martin.
Yes.
Councilman Donza.
Yes.
Counselor Mercia.
Yes.
Mayor Murphy.
Yes.
Counselor Nguyen.
Yes.
8 yeas.
Mr. Mayor, before we adjourn to executive session, 3 reports, all right, on those items? in the water. I'm just looking for a report on what's gonna happen out there. I don't really care about the criminal investigation, I just wanna know what's being done to correct it.
Mr. Manager, couldn't we go into executive session on that third issue? Or you can't?